At exactly 6:45 in the morning, without looking up from his coffee, the most feared man in Chicago pointed one finger at the woman who had given him 5 years of her life and said, "Pack your things. You're done here." No warning, no reason, no thank you. Emily Parker felt the whole room stop breathing. And the cruelest part, he said it the same way he'd order a car to be brought around. If you believe loyalty should mean something, subscribe to this channel and stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will shock you. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Emily Parker did not move at first. She stood beside the massive oak desk where she had stood every single morning for 1,825 days, and she let those 4 words settle into her chest like cold water, finding the bottom of a well. Pack your things. You're done here. Around her, the office of Vincent Morelli went completely silent. There were 6 people in that room, and every one of them had at some point over the past 5 years come to Emily for something. A schedule fixed, a mistake buried, a phone call returned, a disaster quietly erased before it ever reached the boss. Now those same 6 people looked at the floor, at the windows, at their own hands, anywhere except at her. Vincent lifted his coffee. He drank. He set it back down on the coaster she had placed there 20 minutes earlier, the way she always did, exactly 2 inches from his right hand, so he never had to reach. "Did you hear me, Emily?" "I heard you, Mr. Morelli." Her voice did not shake. That was the first thing that surprised the room. They had all expected something, a gasp, a protest, a woman begging to keep the only job most of them assumed she was lucky to have. Because that was how they saw her, a quiet, heavy-set assistant in a plain gray blouse, 32 years old, no wedding ring, no designer bag, no perfume that announced her before she entered. A woman easy to overlook and easier to dismiss. They had no idea what they were looking at. "Good," Vincent said. "Leave the phone, leave the badge. Security will walk you out." And behind him, half sitting on the edge of the credenza with her long legs crossed and a small, satisfied smile playing at the corner of her painted mouth, was Isabella Romano. Emily saw the smile. She had expected the smile. For 3 months, Isabella Romano had been whispering into Vincent Morelli's ear, and Emily had heard almost every word of it because Isabella was not clever enough to whisper quietly, and Emily was too disciplined to ever let on that she was listening. "She knows too much about you, Vincenzo. She controls your whole life. Doesn't that bother you? An assistant should assist. She acts like she owns you. Get someone younger. Get someone who understands her place." Emily had listened to all of it while she organized the shipping manifests, while she rerouted a fuel convoy around a police checkpoint that Isabella did not even know existed, while she personally calmed a Sicilian supplier who had threatened to walk away from a $40 million arrangement because Vincent had insulted his son at dinner. Emily had fixed that. Emily had fixed all of it. And the reward on this cold Tuesday morning was 1 finger and 4 words. She reached up and unclipped the employee badge from her collar. She set it on the desk. Then she took the encrypted phone from her pocket. The black one, the one that connected directly to 7 people whose names could never be spoken out loud, and she placed it beside the badge. Then the security card. Then the small metal access device that opened the vault beneath the building, the one only 3 people in the entire organization possessed. She lined them up neatly, straight, squared to the edge of the desk, even now, even leaving. She could not make herself leave a mess behind. "I understand, Mr. Morelli," she said. That was all. No anger, no tears, no begging. And something about that quiet, that steadiness, made Vincent Morelli glance up for the first time. For just half a second, something flickered across his handsome, hardened face. Not guilt. Vincent Morelli did not do guilt, but something. A flicker of a question he could not quite form, as if some animal part of his brain, deeper than pride, older than Isabella's whispers, had just noticed that the ground beneath his feet had shifted a fraction of an inch. He pushed the feeling away. "Isabella will handle the transition," he said. Emily's eyes moved just briefly to Isabella Romano, and Isabella feeling powerful, feeling like she had finally won a war she never truly understood. She was fighting, said the sentence that Emily would remember for a long time. "Don't worry, honey. We'll manage just fine without you." Emily looked at her for a long, quiet moment. "I hope you do," Emily said. And she meant it. That was the strange thing. She actually meant it. Because whatever these people had done to her, whatever this morning had cost her, there were things happening inside that organization at that very moment that no one in the room understood. A shipment already in motion across the Atlantic. A meeting scheduled for Thursday with a man who did not tolerate surprises. A rival on the north side who had been waiting 3 years for exactly this kind of weakness. And Emily was the only person alive who was holding all of it together in her head all at once, like a woman balancing 100 spinning plates that no one else could even see. She turned toward the door. Emily. She stopped. She did not turn around. Vincent Morelli, for reasons he could not have explained, felt compelled to say something. Anything. And what came out was, 5 years, it was fine work. Fine work. Emily let the words hang there. Then she said without turning, in a voice so calm it almost sounded Mr. Morelli, do you know why you've never lost a shipment in 5 years? Silence. No, Vincent admitted. It just never happened. It never happened, Emily repeated softly, because I never let it happen. And then she walked out. The heavy door closed behind her with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Isabella Romano laughed a light, tinkling, careless laugh, and she slid off the credenza and walked to Vincent and wrapped her arms around his neck. See, she purred. That wasn't so hard. Now the air in here can finally breathe. Vincent smiled, but it was a smaller smile than he intended, and that flicker was back that small, cold question at the base of his skull, and this time it did not go away quite so easily. What Vincent Morelli did not know, could not know, was that the countdown had already begun. That in less than 24 hours, the machine that had carried him to the top of Chicago's underworld would begin to seize and grind and fail one gear at a time, and that not a single person left in that building would understand why. Because the truth was so simple that it had become invisible. Emily Parker was never just an assistant. She was the engine, and Vincent Morelli had just fired the engine and kept the shell. She walked down the long corridor with her spine straight and her chin level past the men in dark suits, who had always nodded to her out of a respect they didn't fully understand, past the reception desk, where young Danny looked up in confusion. Miss Parker, you're leaving early. I'm leaving, Danny. But the Volkov file, you said Mr. Morelli needs to sign it before. Mr. Morelli will figure it out. Danny frowned. The Volkov meeting is Thursday. Who's going to prep the Danny? Emily stopped and looked at the boy, 23 years old, sweet, terrified of this world, the only person in that building who had ever asked her how her weekend was. Take care of yourself, all right? And if things get strange in here, and they will, don't be the last one to leave. Do you understand me? Danny didn't understand, but he nodded because Emily Parker had never once in his memory said something that wasn't worth listening to. She stepped out onto the street, and the cold Chicago wind hit her face, and for the first time in 5 years, Emily Parker had nowhere she needed to be. She should have felt broken. Instead, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed. She felt free. Up in the office, Vincent Morelli tried to return to his morning. He couldn't. The coffee had gone cold, and no one had refilled it because the person who refilled it was gone. His phone buzzed with a call from a number he didn't recognize, and normally the call would have been screened, evaluated, and either handled or handed to him with a one-line summary of who was calling and what they wanted and how he should respond. Now it just buzzed naked and unexplained, and Vincent stared at it as if it were a small, alarming animal that had crawled onto his desk. Isabella, he said. Who is this? Isabella glanced at the screen and shrugged one elegant shoulder. How would I know? Just answer it, Vincenzo. You're the boss. He answered it. It was a man named Petrov, and Petrov was extremely angry, and Petrov was speaking very fast in accented English about a problem at the dock, and a container that is not where you said it would be, and a deadline that is now in 4 hours. And Vincent Morelli, the most feared man in Chicago, found himself doing something he had not done in 5 years. He panicked. What container? Which dock, Petrov? Slow down, I don't. You do not know, Petrov's voice rose to a roar. This is arranged 3 weeks ago. Your people confirm, your girl, she confirmed to me, herself, she say container, 47 berth, 9-6 in morning. And I am here, Morelli. I am standing here in the cold, and there is no container. Vincent covered the phone with his hand. Isabella, do we have something happening at the docks this morning? Isabella looked at him with a beautiful, blank, utterly useless expression. I don't do docks, baby. And there it was. The first crack. So small, so quiet. A man on a dock, a missing container, a deadline in 4 hours, and the only person on Earth who knew exactly where that container was, who had personally arranged for it to be moved to a different berth at 4 a.m. because she'd learned through a contact that berth 9 was going to be searched. That person was at this moment sitting on a city bus with a paper cup of coffee, watching the gray buildings slide past, thinking about absolutely nothing at all. Petrov, Vincent said, and he could hear the strain in his own voice, and he hated it. Give me 1 hour. I'll find your container. He would not find the container in 1 hour. He would not find it in 6. By the time anyone in the organization pieced together that the container had been deliberately, intelligently, life-savingly moved to berth 14, to avoid a customs sweep, Petrov would be gone. The arrangement would be dead, and $11 million would have quietly walked into the harbor and drowned. But that was hours away. For now, Vincent hung up the phone and looked at Isabella. And Isabella smiled at him, and he almost told her to leave. But he didn't, because a man like Vincent Morelli would rather burn his own house down than admit that a woman had been holding up the walls. Across the city, Emily got off the bus. She walked 3 blocks to a small brick apartment building where the paint was peeling, and the radiator clanked, and the rent was reasonable, and she climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, and on the way up, she passed Mrs. Delgado from 3B, who was struggling with 2 heavy grocery bags. Emily, you're home early, mija. I have some free time now, Mrs. Delgado. Let me take those. Oh, you're an angel. You know my Roberto. He never helps his own mother. Emily carried the bags. She listened to the whole story about Roberto. She set the groceries on the kitchen counter, and she declined the coffee twice and accepted it the 3rd time because she knew declining a 4th time would hurt the old woman's feelings. This was who Emily Parker was when no one was watching. Not the woman who could reroute a smuggling operation with 3 phone calls. Just a woman who carried groceries for her neighbor. And nobody in Vincent Morelli's world had the faintest idea that this was the person they had just thrown away. Back at the office, the day continued to unravel. At 11 a.m., a lawyer called about a filing that had to be submitted before noon, and no one knew where the paperwork was because the paperwork was in a system that Emily had built and maintained and that only Emily fully understood. At 1 p.m., 2 of Vincent's crews nearly came to blows in a parking garage because both had received instructions to be there and no one had coordinated it because the person who coordinated everything was gone. And now the 2 crew leaders stood shouting at each other while their men reached under their jackets. At 3 p.m., a politician's aide called to gently, coldly inform Mr. Morelli that the meeting Thursday would need to be reconsidered, given recent instability. And Vincent had no idea what instability the man was talking about, because the man was talking about the fact that word travels fast in that world, and word had already begun to travel that something was wrong inside the Morelli organization. By 6 o'clock that evening, Vincent Morelli sat alone in his office with a headache like a spike behind his right eye, and he looked at the empty chair outside his door where Emily used to sit, and he heard himself mutter, "What is happening today?" He did not yet understand that this was not a bad day. This was the first day of the collapse. Isabella swept in around 7, dressed for dinner, expecting him to be ready. "Vincenzo, we have reservations at 8. Why aren't you?" "Not tonight, Isabella." "What do you mean, not tonight, we?" "I said not tonight." It came out louder than he meant. Isabella recoiled, her beautiful face hardening. And Vincent, seeing that hardness, felt suddenly and profoundly tired. He looked at her, this woman he had chosen, this woman who had told him he'd manage just fine. And for one honest moment, he thought, she doesn't know a single thing about my life. She has never solved a single problem. She has never carried a single weight. And then he pushed that thought away too, because Vincent Morelli was very, very good at pushing away thoughts he did not want to have. "Fine," Isabella snapped. "Sit here alone. Call me when you remember how to treat me." And she was gone in a cloud of perfume, and Vincent Morelli was alone, and the office was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. Because Emily's quiet had always been a working quiet, the quiet of a woman thinking, planning, preventing. This new quiet was different. This was the quiet of a machine that had stopped running. He didn't sleep well that night. Neither did anyone else in the organization, though most of them couldn't have said why. The next morning, Vincent did what he always did when a problem arose. He threw money and power at it. He called a staffing agency, a very expensive, very discreet one, that supplied assistance to men who needed absolute silence, and he demanded the best. I need someone today. Someone excellent. Cost is not a concern. The agency sent a woman named Brooke. Brooke was 30 sharp Ivy League fluent in 3 languages with a resume that could stop traffic. Brooke lasted 3 days. On the third day, Vincent came in to find her white as a sheet, packing her bag. Mr. Morelli, I'm sorry, I can't. This isn't some of what you're asking me to schedule some of the people who call this office. I have to go, I'm sorry. And she left, and she did not ask for her final check, which told Vincent something about exactly what she had glimpsed. The next one lasted a week. Her name was Sandra, and she was tougher, and she stayed a full 7 days before Vincent found a shipment, misdirected a meeting double booked, and a supplier furious over a message Sandra had sent that in Emily's hands would have been phrased in a way that soothed rather than provoked. Sandra didn't know the man she was emailing had a temper. Sandra didn't know a lot of things, because Sandra had a resume, and what Emily had was 5 years of 1,000 tiny observations that lived nowhere but inside her own head. By the end of the second week, Vincent had gone through 4 assistants. By the end of the third, he had stopped counting. And that was when he did something that in 5 years he had never once done. He walked into Emily's old office, the small room beside his own, that he had rarely entered, because there had never been any reason to, and he began to look at what she had left behind. He expected to find nothing, a cleaned-out desk, maybe a plant. Instead, he found a filing system so intricate, so vast, so perfectly organized that he stood in the doorway and simply stared at it. There were binders, dozens of them, color-coded, labeled cross-referenced, supplier profiles, route maps with handwritten notes about which police captains patrolled which districts on which shifts, political contact sheets with details about each man's family, his weaknesses, his price, contingency plans, backup plans for the backup plans, an entire wall of a system that Emily had built with her own 2 hands quietly over 5 years, without ever once being asked to, without ever once being thanked for it. Vincent pulled one binder off the shelf at random. He opened it, and what he read made the breath catch in his chest, because it wasn't just business. Some of the pages were about him. He decided right then that he needed to understand exactly what he had lost. So he called in the one person in the organization he trusted to give him a straight answer, a woman named Teresa, who had run operations for 2 other families before coming to work for him, a woman with 30 years in this life and no patience for illusions. Teresa, I need you to review Emily Parker's old responsibilities. All of them. And I need you to tell me the truth about what that job actually was. Teresa nodded and took the binders and disappeared for 2 days. When she came back, she did not sit down. She stood in front of his desk with a stack of documents in her arms and an expression on her face that Vincent had never seen there before, and Teresa was not a woman who was easily shaken. Mr. Morelli, she said, I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it. Go ahead. She set the documents down. This position was impossible. Vincent frowned. What do you mean impossible? It was an assistant's job. She kept my schedule. No, Teresa's voice was flat and hard. She did not keep your schedule. Mr. Morelli, I have run operations for the Barone family and the Colombo interests, and I have never in 30 years seen one single human being do what this woman was doing. This is not an assistant's job. This is the work of an entire operations department. Logistics, intelligence, security coordination, political liaison, crisis management, personnel. She was doing the work of at least 6 people, and she was doing it so well that none of you ever noticed it was being done at all. The office was very quiet. That can't be right, Vincent said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Teresa picked up one of the documents. 3 weeks ago, there was a container at the docks, berth 9. Vincent felt something cold move through him. According to her notes, she learned on a Sunday night that berth 9 was scheduled for a custom sweep on Wednesday morning. So on Tuesday at 4 a.m., she personally arranged for the container to be moved to berth 14. She rewrote the manifest. She bribed a crane operator. She adjusted the paperwork on 3 separate systems so that no one would notice. And she did all of this, Mr. Morelli, without ever telling you it was happening. Because in her mind, it wasn't a problem. It was just Tuesday. Vincent thought of Petrov, of the missing container, of the $11 million that had drowned in the harbor because a new assistant had shown up at berth 9, found nothing, and had no idea to check berth 14. My God, he said quietly. There's more. Teresa flipped to another page. The two crews that nearly killed each other in the parking garage last week, her notes explain it. Those two crew leaders hate each other. They've hated each other for 6 years over a woman, if you can believe it. Emily knew that, so for 5 years she made absolutely certain that those two men were never ever scheduled to be in the same place at the same time. Never, not once. It was a standing rule in her head that no one else knew existed. And the moment she was gone, they ended up in the same garage because no one was left who knew to keep them apart. Vincent sat down slowly. She wasn't managing your calendar, Mr. Morelli. Teresa leaned forward. She was managing your entire world, every day, silently, and you fired her because your girlfriend didn't like her. That last sentence landed like a slap, and Teresa did not apologize for it because Teresa was too old and had seen too much to soften the truth for a man who badly needed to hear it. Vincent Morelli said nothing. He looked at the stack of documents on his desk. 5 years of a woman's mind laid bare in ink. 5 years of a person seeing 5 steps ahead while everyone praised him for being a genius. He had believed his own legend. He had believed that his empire ran smoothly because he was brilliant, because he was feared, because he was Vincent Morelli. And it had never once occurred to him that the reason he never faced a crisis was that a quiet, heavy-set woman in a gray blouse was killing every crisis in its cradle before it ever reached his door. Teresa, he said finally, the other assistants, the ones who quit, could any of them learn to do this? Teresa actually laughed. It was not a kind laugh. Mr. Morelli, you could give me 100 assistants in 10 years and I could not build another Emily Parker. Because what she has isn't in a resume. It's not a skill you hire. It's 5 years of her paying attention to everything and everyone all the time and remembering all of it and caring enough to act on it before anyone asked. You can't buy that. You had it and you threw it in the trash. She gathered her papers. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, in 30 years, I've met exactly 2 people I would have followed anywhere. One of them is dead. The other one just cleaned out her desk because you pointed a finger at her over your morning coffee. And then Teresa was gone, and Vincent Morelli was alone with the wreckage of his own certainty. He didn't move for a long time. Then slowly, he reached for the binder he had opened earlier, the one with the pages about him, and he began to read. Mr. Morelli skips meals when he's under stress. Keep protein bars in the second drawer. Left drawer not right. He won't ask for them. Just leave them where he'll see them around 2 p.m. Vincent opened the second drawer of his desk, the left one. There was a small box of protein bars inside. He had never noticed them. In 5 years, he had never once noticed them, but they had always been there, restocked, waiting placed by a woman who had watched him closely enough to know that he forgot to eat when he was frightened and who had never told him she knew because telling him would have embarrassed him, and protecting his pride was just one more thing she quietly did. He turned the page. He pretends the cold doesn't bother him, but his hands ache in the winter. Turn the office heat up 2 degrees on the days below freezing, and don't mention it. He turned another. He gets quiet before he makes a bad decision. When he goes quiet, buy him time. Don't let him sign anything the same hour. Page after page after page. Not the notes of an employee. The notes of someone who had known him better than anyone had ever known him in his entire life. Better than his mother, better than Isabella, better perhaps than he knew himself. And he had told her it was fine work. Vincent Morelli, the most feared man in Chicago, put his head in his hands and sat very still. And for the first time in more years than he could count, he felt something crack open inside his chest. Something he had spent his whole life keeping locked and sealed. He felt shame. But shame he was about to learn was a luxury, because while Vincent Morelli sat in his office reading the private notes of the woman he had betrayed, another man in another part of the city had just made a discovery of his own. A man who had spent 3 long years unable to lay a glove on the Morelli organization, unable to understand why every attack failed, every ambush was anticipated, every weakness he tried to exploit somehow closed before he could reach it. A man who had begun in his frustration to wonder if Vincent Morelli was simply the smartest man alive. That man's name was Alexander Russo, and he had just heard a very interesting rumor. The rumor came from a bartender who had overheard 2 Morelli soldiers complaining into their whiskey about how the whole operation had gone to pieces in the last 3 weeks, about missing containers and canceled meetings, and a supplier who walked away and about how none of it had ever happened before, not once, not until the boss got rid of Parker. Alexander Russo set down his glass. Parker, he said. Who is Parker? Nobody at his table knew. So Alexander Russo did what men like Alexander Russo do. He sent people to find out. And what they came back with over the following days rearranged everything he thought he knew about his greatest rival. Boss, his lieutenant said, laying photographs on the table. The Parker woman, she was Morelli's assistant, 5 years. Alexander looked at the photographs and felt something close to disappointment. A heavy-set woman in a plain blouse, 30-something, unremarkable. An assistant, he said flatly. You're telling me Morelli's whole operation fell apart because he fired his secretary. That's the thing, boss. The lieutenant hesitated. The more we dug, the stranger it got. Every time we tried to hit Morelli over the last 3 years, every ambush that failed, every deal we tried to poison, every man we tried to turn. We traced it back, and every single time there was a change made at the last minute. A route adjusted, a meeting moved, a message sent. Someone was always one step ahead of us. Alexander went very still. It was her, the lieutenant said. It was always her. She's the reason we could never touch him. Not Morelli, her. For a long moment, Alexander Russo did not speak. 3 years. 3 years of throwing himself against a wall he could not break. 3 years of losing men and money, and face 3 years of lying awake, wondering what secret genius Vincent Morelli possessed. And the answer all along had been a quiet woman that Morelli himself had valued so little that he'd fired her over breakfast. Alexander began to laugh, softly at first, then harder, until his men glanced at each other, unsure. He fired her, Alexander said, wiping his eyes. He fired her. The greatest weapon either of us has ever seen, and that fool handed it to the street. He stood up. He walked to the window, and when he turned around, the laughter was gone, and in its place was the cold, patient hunger that had made Alexander Russo the second most feared man in Chicago, and in his own mind, the man who deserved to be the first. Find her, he said, wherever she is. I want to meet the woman who beat me for 3 years. And when we find her, boss, what do we do with her? Alexander smiled, and it was not a warm smile. We offer her everything Morelli never did, and if she is half as smart as I think she is, she'll take it. And then, gentlemen, we will use Vincent Morelli's own weapon to bury Vincent Morelli. His men left to begin the search. Alexander stayed at the window a long time, looking out over the city he intended to own, and for the first time in 3 years, he believed that everything he wanted was finally within his reach. He was wrong about one thing, though. He believed Emily Parker was a weapon that could be bought. He had no idea what he was actually looking for, because at that very moment, across the city, Emily Parker was not plotting revenge. She was not nursing bitterness. She was not waiting by the phone for Vincent Morelli to come crawling back. She was sitting in a folding chair at the Lincoln Park Community Center, helping a 70-year-old man named Walter fill out the forms for his late wife's pension because Walter's hands shook too badly to write, and no one else had time for him. You're a good girl, Walter told her. You know that in my day, people helped each other. Nobody helps anybody anymore. I'm helping you, Walter. You are at that. He squinted at her. What do you do, sweetheart, for a living, I mean? You've got a smart way about you. Emily thought about the question. She thought about the encrypted phone she'd left on an oak desk. She thought about the $11 million in the harbor and the 2 crews in the garage and the container at berth 14. She thought about 5 years of holding an empire together with nothing but her mind and her memory and a quiet, stubborn refusal to let things fall apart. I used to solve problems, she said, for a company. You any good at it? Emily smiled, and there was something in the smile that Walter, being an old man who had seen a great deal of life, noticed and wondered about. I was very good at it, she said quietly, but they didn't need me anymore. Walter shook his head. Then they're fools, sweetheart. Anybody lets a person like you walk out the door is a damn fool. Emily patted his hand and said nothing. But that evening, walking home through the cold, she allowed herself just for a moment to think about Vincent Morelli. Not with anger, she had never been an angry person, but with a strange, sad tenderness, the kind you feel for someone you cared about who never once knew how much you cared for them. She thought about the protein bars in the second drawer, the left one. She thought about the office heat turned up 2 degrees on freezing days. She thought about 1,000 small acts of care that she had performed in silence, expecting nothing, receiving nothing, and continuing anyway because that was simply who she was. And she thought without bitterness, he'll understand someday. When it's all falling down around him, he'll finally understand what I was. She did not know how right she was. She did not know that at that exact moment, Vincent Morelli was sitting alone in her empty office with a binder open on his lap, reading her handwriting by the light of a single lamp, and that the most feared man in Chicago had a look on his face that none of his enemies would have recognized and none of his friends had ever seen. She did not know that a black car had begun very quietly to follow her home. She did not know that two of the most dangerous men in the city were at that very hour both thinking about her, one with regret and one with hunger, and that within a matter of days, the quiet, invisible life she had built for herself was going to be shattered by both of them at once. She only knew that she was tired and that it was cold, and that tomorrow she had promised Mrs. Delgado she would help carry the groceries again. So Emily Parker climbed the stairs to her small apartment, and she made herself a simple dinner, and she went to bed early the way she always did. And behind her in the dark, the black car idled at the curb, its headlights off, and inside it, a man lifted a phone to his ear and said very softly, "We found her boss. She's exactly where you said she'd be, living like a nobody. She has no idea we're here." And on the other end of the line, in a room across the city, Alexander Russo smiled into the darkness and said one word, "Perfect." Meanwhile, Vincent Morelli closed the binder. He had read enough. He understood now. Fully, completely, and far too late, he understood exactly what he had done and exactly what he had lost. And a man like Vincent Morelli, when he finally understands a thing, does not sit still. He stood up. He walked out of the small office. He walked past the empty desk and down the long corridor and into his own office where Isabella's perfume still hung faintly in the air, and he picked up his phone and he was about to make a call that would begin to set right the greatest mistake of his life. But before he could dial, his phone rang. It was Teresa. And Teresa's voice when he answered was tight and low and urgent in a way that made every hair on Vincent Morelli's arm stand up. "Mr. Morelli, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind you need to hear standing up." Teresa took a breath. "I've been asking around, quietly, trying to understand how deep the damage goes. And about an hour ago, one of my contacts on the north side told me something." She paused. "Alexander Russo knows about Emily." The name went through Vincent like ice water. What does that mean, he knows about Emily? It means he figured out what we just figured out. It means he knows she's the reason he could never touch us. And it means, Mr. Morelli, that Alexander Russo has spent the last 3 days looking for a woman we threw out into the street with no protection, no phone, no security, no anything. Teresa's voice dropped even lower. "He's already found her. My contact says Russo's people have been sitting outside her apartment since this afternoon." Vincent Morelli's hand tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. Everything he had just read, every note, every act of quiet care she had shown him for 5 years, rose up in his memory all at once. The protein bars. The heat turned up 2 degrees. The container moved to berth 14. The 2 crews kept apart for 6 years. 1,000 invisible kindnesses from a woman he had never once thanked, a woman he had discarded like she was nothing. A woman who was now sitting alone in a small apartment with no idea that the most dangerous man in the city was parked outside her door because of a secret she had never asked to carry. Teresa, Vincent said, and his voice had changed completely, had become something quiet and cold and absolutely certain. "Where does she live?" "Mr. Morelli, if you go over there, Russo's people." "Where does she live, Teresa?" There was a pause. "I have the address," Teresa said. Vincent Morelli grabbed his coat. And as he walked out of the office that Emily Parker had held together for 5 years, the office he had never once realized was hers as much as it was his, he understood one final thing, the truest thing he had understood all day. He was not going to that apartment to save his empire. He was going to save her, whatever it cost, whatever he had to do, whoever he had to face. He was going to reach Emily Parker's door before Alexander Russo did. And somewhere across the city, in a small apartment above a peeling brick building, Emily Parker slept unaware of any of it, while 2 dangerous men in one very small window of time began silently to close around her. Vincent Morelli drove faster than he had ever driven in his life. He blew through 2 red lights on the north side, one hand on the wheel and the other gripping his phone, and Teresa's voice was in his ear the whole way, low and steady, and trying to keep him from doing something stupid. Mr. Morelli, listen to me. If Russo's people are watching the building, you can't just walk up to the front door. You don't know how many there are. You don't know if they've been told to take her tonight or just to watch. Then I'll find out when I get there. That's not a plan, that's a death wish. Teresa, Vincent's voice was flat. 5 years. 5 years she kept me alive and I never once said thank you. I'm not going to sit in an office and let Alexander Russo put his hands on her because I was too proud to notice what she was. Now tell me which floor. There was a long breath on the line. 3rd floor, Teresa said finally. Apartment 3C. And Mr. Morelli, please, don't get yourself killed proving a point to a woman who doesn't even know you're coming. He hung up. The building rose up out of the dark ahead of him, a tired brick thing with a crooked fire escape and a few lit windows, and Vincent slowed the car a block away and killed the engine and sat for a moment breathing, forcing his heartbeat back down to something he could think through. Because Teresa was right about one thing. He couldn't just walk in. So he made himself do the thing Emily would have done. He made himself look, and there it was. A black sedan parked across the street, headlights off, engine running. 2 silhouettes inside, facing the building. Vincent Morelli had spent his whole life around men like the ones in that car, and he knew exactly what they were, and he knew that the moment he stepped out of his own vehicle, they would recognize him because there was not a soldier in Chicago who didn't know the face of Vincent Morelli, which meant the front door was closed to him. He looked up at the 3rd floor. He counted windows, and he thought with a strange, sharp ache, she would already know how to get in. She'd have found a way before I even parked. He got out of the car quietly and moved down the alley toward the back of the building. 10:17 at night and 3 floors up, Emily Parker woke because something was wrong. She could not have said what. She had always been like this, even as a child waking in the dark with the certainty that the shape of the world had shifted. She lay still in her bed and listened. The radiator clanked. The building settled. And then faintly from the street below, she heard a car door close. Not slam, close, carefully. The way a person closes a door when they don't want to be heard. Emily's eyes opened fully. She did not panic. Panic was a luxury she had trained out of herself years ago. Instead, her mind, that quiet, relentless machine, simply began to work. She sat up. She went to the window, staying to the side, not showing herself the way she had learned to stand at windows in a life she had tried very hard to leave behind. And she looked down. A black sedan, 2 men, one of them getting out. And Emily Parker understood in the space of a single heartbeat that her quiet little life was over. She did not wonder who they were. She knew who they were. She knew the way a soldier knows the sound of the specific gun that's about to be fired at him. These were not Vincent's men. Vincent's men she could have named on sight. These were strangers, and strangers watching her building at 10 at night meant only one thing. Someone had figured out what she was, and someone had come to collect her. Russo, she whispered to the dark. Because who else? Who else had spent 3 years losing to a shadow? Who else would want the shadow for himself? Her hands were already moving. She pulled on clothes. She grabbed the small bag she kept packed by the door, a habit she had never explained to any. A bag that held cash and a spare phone and a false ID. She had made herself 2 years ago because some part of Emily Parker had always known that a woman who holds an empire together is a woman who will one day need to run. She was reaching for the door when she heard the footsteps in the stairwell. She froze. The building's front door had a lock. A cheap one, but a lock, which meant someone had either buzzed their way in or forced it or picked it, and any of those meant they were already inside, already climbing, already close. She counted the footsteps. 1 set, heavy, coming up fast. Emily backed away from the door into the dark of her apartment, her mind racing through the layout of a building she knew better than the men outside ever could. The fire escape, the window in the bedroom, the gap between this building and the next close enough, maybe if the ladder held. She had mapped all of it the day she moved in without ever quite admitting to herself why. The footsteps reached the 3rd floor. They stopped outside 3C, and a voice low and unfamiliar said through the door, "Miss Parker, Mr. Russo would like a word. Open up and nobody has to have a bad night." Emily didn't answer. She moved. 10:24 and in the alley behind the building, Vincent Morelli found the fire escape ladder 6 feet too high to reach. He swore under his breath. He dragged a dumpster over, wincing at the noise, and climbed onto it and stretched, and his fingertips caught the bottom rung, and he hauled himself up onto the swaying metal, and he began to climb toward the third floor as fast as he dared, and the whole time one thought hammered in his skull. Faster, faster. You're already too late. You've been too late this whole time. Inside, the man at the door tried the handle. Locked. Miss Parker, he said again. And now there was an edge in it. I'm not going to ask again. Mr. Russo doesn't like to be kept waiting, and you don't want me to come in there and get you. Open the door. And Emily, standing in the dark of her own bedroom with her packed bag over her shoulder and her hand on the window latch, made a decision. She would not open that door. But she also would not simply vanish, because vanishing had a cost she understood too well. If Russo's men lost her tonight, they would not shrug and go home. They would tear her life apart looking. They would go to Mrs. Delgado. They would go to Walter at the community center. They would go to every soft and gentle thread of the small good life she had built, and they would pull, and people who had nothing to do with any of this would suffer. So Emily did what she always did. She thought 3 steps ahead. I hear you, she called out, keeping her voice calm enough to buy seconds. I'm getting dressed. Give me a minute. You've got 30 seconds. I'm a large woman in the dark, sweetheart, Emily said, and even now, even here, there was a dry steel in her voice. It's going to take me more than 30 seconds. Unless Mr. Russo wants me to come out in my nightgown, in which case that's on him. There was a pause, then muffled a second voice in low laughter, and the first man saying, fine, 60 seconds, and then I'm coming in. 60 seconds. Emily opened the window without a sound. 10:26 and Vincent Morelli's hand appeared over the edge of the third-floor fire escape landing, and he pulled himself up, and he found himself staring through a dark window into an apartment he had never seen. And there in the gloom, a woman turned toward him with a bag on her shoulder and absolutely no fear on her face, only a flat assessing calm, and for 1/2 second, the two of them simply looked at each other through the glass. Emily, Vincent breathed. Her expression did not change. If anything, something in her went colder. She slid the window the rest of the way open, and she leaned close to the gap, and the first words Emily Parker said to Vincent Morelli, since he had fired her over coffee, were not what he expected. They were, how many are downstairs? Not what are you doing here? Not why should I trust you? Not how dare you? Just instantly the mind clicking into place, gathering the one piece of information that mattered. One car, Vincent whispered. 2 men, one's inside coming up, the other's still in the sedan. Wrong. Emily was already climbing through the window past him onto the fire escape, moving with a quiet efficiency that startled him. This woman he had always thought of as slow, as soft, as ordinary. There's a third. There's always a third. Russo doesn't send 2 for someone he thinks is worth taking alive. There's one at the front, one in the car watching the street, and one in the back, covering exactly the route we're about to take. She looked at him. Which means you climbing up this fire escape was either very lucky or very stupid, and I already know which. From inside the apartment, the man at the door called, 30 seconds, Miss Parker. Emily's eyes flicked to the window, then back to Vincent, and she made a decision as fast as flipping a switch. Down, she whispered. Not the alley. The alley's covered. We go down 1 floor and cross to the Kowalski's window on the 2nd floor unit, 2C. They're in Florida until March. The window doesn't latch. I checked it in October. We go through their place, out their front door, down the interior stairs, and out the side entrance on Ashland that these men don't know exists because it's not on any floor plan they'd have pulled. Move quietly and do exactly what I do. Vincent stared at her. You checked the neighbor's window latch in October, he said. You've been planning an escape from your own apartment for months. Emily was already climbing down. I plan escapes from every room I've ever been in, Mr. Morelli. I planned one from your office my first week. Now move. 10:28, an inside apartment, 3C patients ran out. The man at the door stepped back and drove his shoulder into it. Once, twice. On the third hit, the cheap lock gave, and the door burst open, and he stumbled into the dark apartment, gun up, sweeping the room, and found it empty. Bed still warm, window open, cold air pouring in. She's on the fire escape, he shouted. Marco, she's coming down the back. Get her! But by the time the second man rounded the corner into the alley, there was no one on the fire escape at all. Just an empty ladder swaying gently in the dark, and above it an open window, and no sign whatsoever of where the woman had gone. Because Emily Parker and Vincent Morelli were already inside the Kowalski's silent apartment on the second floor, moving through a stranger's living room in the dark. Emily's handlight on Vincent's sleeve, guiding him past furniture she had somehow memorized toward a front door that opened onto a hallway that led to a staircase that led to an exit that Alexander Russo's men did not know existed. "How?" Vincent whispered as they moved. "How do you know the layout of your neighbor's apartment?" "Because I know the layout of every apartment in this building, in the two buildings on either side, in the parking structure across the street, in the route of the night bus, in the shift change of the beat cops on this block." Emily eased the Kowalski's front door open and checked the hallway. Empty. "I know these things the same way I knew that Berth 9 was going to be searched. I pay attention. It's the only thing I've ever been good at." "It's not the only thing," Vincent said quietly. Emily didn't answer that. She pulled him into the hall. 10:31, and they were down the interior stairs and standing at the side exit on Ashland, and Emily held up a hand for him to stop, and she cracked the door, and she looked out at the street for a long 3 seconds, reading it the way another person reads a page. "There," she murmured. "Across the street. Doorway of the laundromat. See him? That's your third man. He's watching the front and the alley. He can't see this door from that angle, but he'll see us the second we step onto the sidewalk and turn other direction." She thought. Fast. "We go left, down to the corner into the alley behind the pharmacy. There's a gap in the fence. We come out on Wolcott, and there's a bus that comes at 10:38 that'll take us out of this neighborhood entirely. We have," she didn't even glance at a watch, "about 6 minutes to make a 4-minute walk without being seen. It's enough. Barely. Stay on my left, keep your face down, and walk like you belong here, and you're bored." And then before she stepped out, Emily turned and looked at Vincent Morelli full in the face. For the first time, really looked at him. And something crossed her expression that was not fear, and was not anger, but was something much more complicated. "Why are you here?" she said. Not a demand, a genuine question. "You fired me. 3 weeks ago, you pointed at me like I was a piece of furniture you were tired of. And now you climbed a fire escape in the dark to end up in the middle of a war you don't understand over a woman you don't even—" "Because I read your notebooks," Vincent said. Emily went still. "I read all of them, Emily. Every binder, every page. The container at Berth 14, the 2 crews you kept apart for 6 years. He swallowed the protein bars in the left drawer. The heat turned up 2 degrees on cold days so my hands wouldn't ache. 5 years of things you did for me that I never saw, that I never thanked you for, that I never even knew were happening." His voice cracked just slightly, and Vincent Morelli was not a man whose voice cracked. "I fired the best thing that ever happened to my life because a woman I don't love told me to. And the second you were gone, everything I built started dying because you were never the assistant Emily. You were the whole thing. You were all of it. And I was too stupid and too proud to see it until it was already too late." For a moment, Emily Parker said nothing. Then she said very quietly, "The bus is in 5 minutes, Mr. Morelli. You can tell me the rest when we're not about to be shot." And she stepped out onto Ashland Street, and Vincent followed her, and together they walked into the dark. 10:38, and the bus came, and they were on it, and they were gone. And behind them, in the ruins of Emily Parker's small, quiet life, 3 of Alexander Russo's men stood in an empty apartment and tried to figure out how a heavy-set assistant with no training and no backup had vanished into thin air right out from under them. "She had help," one of them said, looking at the open window, the swaying ladder, the impossible absence. "From who she's got nobody. That's the whole point. Morelli threw her out. She's alone." But the first man crouched by the window and looked at the fire escape and the dumpster that had been dragged beneath it in the alley below a dumpster that had not been there that afternoon, and he felt a cold worm of doubt turn over in his gut. "Somebody moved that dumpster," he said. "Somebody climbed up. Somebody was here." He stood. "We need to call Mr. Russo, and he is not going to be happy." He was right. Alexander Russo was not happy. 10:52, and in a warm, richly appointed room across the city, Alexander Russo listened to the news that his men had cornered Emily Parker in her apartment and then somehow lost her, and he did not shout, and he did not throw anything, and that was worse. He simply went very quiet. Let me be certain I understand, Alexander said at last in a voice like a blade being drawn slowly from a sheath. Three of my men, three, surrounded one unarmed woman in a third-floor apartment with one exit, and she walked away clean. Boss, we think she had. She had nothing. Alexander stood. That's the entire reason she was valuable, you fool. She had nothing and no one, and she still made three of my best men look like children playing hide and seek. Do you understand what that means? He turned to face them. It means she is exactly what I thought she was. It means the rumors were not exaggerated. It means the woman who beat me for 3 years just beat me again tonight alone in the dark with no warning. And gentlemen, I have never wanted anything in my life the way I now want that woman working for me. He walked to the window. Find her, he said, but this time do not chase her. She is smarter than you. She will always be smarter than you. So we do not chase. We wait. We watch the soft parts of her life, the old woman in her building, the community center, the people she helps. She is a person who cannot stop caring, and that, my friends, is the thread we pull. He smiled at the glass. And one more thing. Find out who moved that dumpster, because someone helped her tonight, and I want to know who was foolish enough or loyal enough to climb a fire escape into the middle of my operation. His lieutenant hesitated. I don't think anything yet, Alexander said, but I have a suspicion. And if my suspicion is correct, then tonight just became far more interesting than I imagined, because it would mean Vincent Morelli finally understands what he threw away. He laughed softly, coldly. And a man fighting to win back what he lost is a very different animal from a man who never valued it at all. Go. Find them both. 11:15, and across the city, in a cheap motel room on the far south side, Emily Parker sat on the edge of a bed and finally allowed herself to breathe. Vincent stood by the door watching her, and for a long time neither of them spoke. It was Vincent who broke first. You saved my life tonight, he said. You know that. If you hadn't known about the third man, if you hadn't known about the neighbor's window, if you hadn't, I saved us both. Don't make it about you. But there was no cruelty in it, only exhaustion. Emily rubbed her face with both hands. 3 weeks, Mr. Morelli. I was out for 3 weeks. I helped an old man fill out a pension form. I carried groceries. I let myself believe I could just be a person. And now Alexander Russo knows my face, knows my building, knows the people I care about, and I can never go back to any of it. So no, I'm not going to make this about you and your feelings. I'm going to figure out how to survive. Vincent flinched. I'm sorry. I know you are. It doesn't fix anything, but I know you are. He crossed the room and sat down carefully on the far end of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. And for a while they sat in silence, two people who had spent 5 years in the same office and were somehow only now in a filthy motel room in the middle of the night actually seeing each other. Can I ask you something? Vincent said finally. You can ask. Russo offered you nothing tonight, but he will. He'll find a way to make an offer because that's what he does. He doesn't destroy things he can use, he takes them. Money, power, a seat at the top of the biggest operation in this city. Everything I never gave you, everything you earned 10 times over and never got. Vincent looked at her. Why didn't you go to him 3 weeks ago? You could have. You knew everything about me, every route, every weakness, every secret. You could have walked across town and handed my whole empire to Alexander Russo on a plate and named your price. Why didn't you? Emily was quiet for a long moment. Because I don't want power, she said. Vincent stared at her. Everyone wants power. No. Emily shook her head slowly. You want power. Russo wants power. The whole rotten world you live in runs on people wanting power. But I never did, Mr. Morelli. Not once. Do you know why I was good at my job? It wasn't ambition. It was the opposite. I didn't want your chair. I didn't want your enemies or your money or your fear. I just wanted things to work. I wanted the plates to keep spinning. I wanted problems solved before they hurt anyone. That's all I've ever wanted my whole life, to keep things from falling apart. Her voice dropped. You could never understand that because you've always assumed everyone around you wants what you want. But I'm not you. I never was. Vincent Morelli looked at this woman he had employed for 5 years and dismissed in 5 seconds. And he understood with a slow and terrible clarity that he had never known her at all. Then what do you want? He asked. if not power, if not revenge, if not even to hurt me for what I did. What does Emily Parker actually want? And Emily looked at him tired and clear-eyed and utterly without illusion, and she said one word, peace. The words sat in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Peace, Vincent repeated. Peace. Emily almost smiled. I want a small apartment and a job that doesn't require me to memorize the shift patterns of police captains. I want to help an old man with his pension forms and not have to check the street first. I want to make dinner and go to bed early and wake up in the morning and have the biggest problem of my day be whether the bus is running late. She looked away. That's it. That's the whole dream. And it's the one thing that neither you nor Alexander Russo will ever let me have, because both of you need what's in my head too badly to ever let me walk away with it. And that, Vincent realized, was the tragedy of Emily Parker. She was the most capable person he had ever met, and all she wanted was an ordinary life, and her own extraordinary mind was the very thing that made an ordinary life impossible. 11:40 and Vincent's phone buzzed. Teresa. He answered, and Teresa's voice came fast and tight. Mr. Morelli, are you alive? Did you find her? She's with me. She's safe. She got us both out. Thank God. Listen carefully because it's worse than we thought. Teresa took a breath. Russo's people have been all over the north side asking questions, but that's not the worst of it. The worst is what's happening back here. Isabella. Vincent's stomach tightened. What about Isabella? She came into the office tonight an hour after you left, and she wasn't looking for you, Mr. Morelli. She went straight to the files, Emily's files, the binders. She spent 40 minutes photographing pages, and then she left, and she didn't know I saw her. Teresa's voice went hard. Mr. Morelli, why would your girlfriend, the woman who convinced you to fire Emily in the first place, be photographing Emily's operational files in the middle of the night and sneaking out with them? Vincent went very still. Across the motel room, Emily saw his face change, and she straightened. Say that again, Vincent said quietly into the phone. Isabella photographed the files, Mr. Morelli. All the sensitive ones, the roots, the contacts, the political liaisons, everything Emily built. And then she made a phone call in the parking garage before she drove off, and my man was close enough to hear one thing before she noticed him. Teresa paused. She said, and I quote, I have everything he asked for. Tell Alexander it's done. The phone nearly slipped from Vincent's hand. Isabella. Isabella Romano, the daughter of a powerful political family. Isabella, who had spent 3 months whispering in his ear, telling him Emily knew too much. Emily controlled too much. Emily had to go. Isabella, who had smiled that satisfied little smile when Emily walked out the door. She had not been jealous. She had never been jealous. She had been working for Alexander Russo the entire time. She was a plant, Vincent said, and his voice was hollow with the horror of it. Russo put her next to me. He put her in my bed. And she talked me into firing the one person who was protecting me. She engineered the whole thing. Getting rid of Emily wasn't jealousy, it was the plan. Step 1 was remove my defenses. And I did it. I did it myself with my own mouth because a beautiful woman told me to. Across the room, Emily had gone pale. Mr. Morelli, she said sharply, Teresa's still on the line. He nodded. Put her on speaker. Now. He did. And Emily leaned toward the phone, and her voice was the voice Vincent remembered from 5 years of crises, quietly averted, the voice of a woman whose mind moved faster than the disaster in front of her. Teresa, this is Emily. Listen to me very carefully because we have almost no time. If Isabella has been feeding Russo information for 3 months, then Russo doesn't just know my routes. He knows the routes I set up before I left, which means every fallback I built into that organization is already compromised. But that's not the emergency. Emily's eyes were wide now, and for the first time all night, Vincent saw real fear in them, not for herself, but for something else. The emergency is the shipment. What shipment? Vincent said. The Petrov replacement. Emily's words came fast. After Petrov walked, I know you scrambled to set up a new supplier because you had to, because the whole operation depended on it. Teresa, is there a shipment coming in this week? A big one. The one that's supposed to save the whole quarter. Silence on the line. Then slowly Teresa said, yes, Thursday, $40 million of product. It's the deal that keeps us solvent. Mr. Morelli signed it 8 days ago. Emily closed her eyes. Then Russo knows about it, she said. If Isabella's been photographing files and reporting to him, he knows the date, the location, the crew, everything. And he's not going to steal it, Teresa. He's going to let you walk right into it, and then he's going to take the product and the money and blame it on you. And he's going to make sure the police are there to catch whoever's left, because that's how Russo works. He doesn't just beat you. He uses your own operation to destroy you. She opened her eyes. Thursday's shipment is a trap. It has been a trap since the day you signed it. And the only reason I know that is because setting that kind of trap is exactly what I would have done to him. The motel room was dead silent. Vincent Morelli looked at Emily Parker, and Emily Parker looked back at him, and in her eyes he saw the full staggering scope of what he had done 3 weeks ago over a cup of coffee when he pointed one finger at the only person who could have seen this coming. Emily, he said, and his voice was barely a whisper. If that shipment is a trap, if Russo takes it, if the police are there, then you're finished, Emily said simply. Not weakened, finished. 40 million gone, your top crew arrested, and Alexander Russo standing on the ruins of everything you built. By Friday morning, there won't be a Morelli organization. There will just be Russo. She stood up. Unless someone who understands exactly how the trap was built gets there first and turns it inside out. Vincent stared at her. You mean you? I mean me. Emily picked up her bag. Because I'm the only person alive who can look at that trap and see the way out of it. And because, whether I like it or not, Mr. Morelli Alexander Russo made this personal the moment he sent 3 men to drag me out of my home. He took my peace. He put a plant in your life to use me as a weapon and then throw me away. He's going to hurt Mrs. Delgado and Walter and everyone else if I run. Her jaw set. So I'm not going to run. I'm going to do the one thing Alexander Russo isn't prepared for. I'm going to fight back with the only weapon I've ever had. Which is, Emily Parker looked at him, and for the first time that night, she smiled a real smile, small and cold and absolutely certain. My mind, she said. Now sit down, Mr. Morelli, and tell me everything about that shipment. Every detail, because we have until Thursday to take the trap that Alexander Russo built to destroy you and turn it into the trap that destroys him. And we're going to need every hour we've got. And Vincent Morelli, the most feared man in Chicago, sat down and did exactly what she told him to do. Because he understood now, finally and completely, that the most powerful person in that room, the most powerful person he had ever known, was the quiet, heavy-set woman he had fired over coffee 3 weeks ago and had spent every day since learning to see. Midnight came and went, and in a filthy motel room on the south side of Chicago by the light of a single lamp, Emily Parker began quietly and methodically to plan the downfall of the man who had taken everything from her. She spread a sheet of motel stationery on the little table. She uncapped a pen, and she started to write in the same neat, patient handwriting that filled a dozen binders in an office across town, the first lines of a plan that Alexander Russo would never see coming. Vincent watched her work, this woman he had thrown away, and he thought about the notebooks and the protein bars and the 5 years he had spent being praised as a genius for the quiet brilliance of a person he never bothered to know. Emily, he said softly. She didn't look up. Keep talking about the shipment. I'm listening. I will. In a second. He waited until she raised her eyes. I just need to say it once. Out loud. No, so you hear it and I mean it. He took a breath. Thank you. For 5 years. For all of it. For every single thing you did, yet I never saw. His voice was rough. I'm sorry it took me losing everything to say it. For a moment, Emily Parker looked at him, and something in her hard, tired face softened just slightly. Just for a second. You're welcome, Mr. Morelli, she said quietly. Then she looked back down at the paper. Now, she said, and the pen began to move. Tell me about the crew you assigned to Thursday. Names, faces, which ones you trust. Because if Isabella's been in your files, then one of them is already Russo's, and before we can spring this trap, I need to know exactly which of your own men is going to try to kill you first. And outside in the dark city, Alexander Russo's people fanned out across Chicago, hunting for a woman who was at that very moment 3 steps ahead of all of them, bent over a piece of cheap motel stationery, quietly deciding the fate of 2 empires with nothing but a pen and the most dangerous mind in the city. They worked until dawn. By the time gray light crept through the thin motel curtains, the little table was covered in sheets of stationery. each one filled with Emily's neat handwriting, and Vincent Morelli had told her everything. Every name on the Thursday crew, every detail of the deal he'd signed 8 days ago. Every route, every handoff, every man who would be standing on that dock when the product came in. And Emily had listened to all of it with her chin in her hand and her eyes half closed the way she always listened, and slowly, piece by piece, she had begun to see the shape of the trap that Alexander Russo had built. "Say the crew names again," she said, slowly this time. Vincent recited them. Sal Bruno, Tommy Fisher, the Delgado brothers, no relation to your neighbor. Marcus Webb, and Danny. Emily's pen stopped. Danny from reception. He's been asking for more responsibility. I put him on the crew. You put a 23-year-old boy who's afraid of his own shadow on a $40 million shipment. Emily rubbed her eyes. All right, that's a problem, but it's a small one. Sal Bruno is the bigger one. She tapped the paper. Sal Bruno. Tell me about him. And don't tell me what you think about him. Tell me facts. When did he join? Who vouched for him? What's changed in the last 3 months? Vincent thought. He came to us maybe 4 months ago. Solid guy, referred by... He stopped. His face went cold. Referred by Isabella. She said he was a cousin of a friend. Vouched for him personally. Emily set down the pen. There it is, she said quietly. There's your inside man. Isabella got you to fire your defense. Then Isabella walked her own man onto your most important crew. Sal Bruno isn't yours, Mr. Morelli. He never was. He's the one who's going to signal Russo when the product hits the dock, and he's the one who's going to make sure your people are looking the wrong way when the police show up. She leaned back. The whole thing is elegant, I'll give Russo that. He didn't try to beat you. He just quietly replaced every part of your machine with parts that belonged to him, including you. You were the last piece to fall into place the day you fired me. 6:40 in the morning, and Vincent Morelli sat in a motel chair and absorbed the full architecture of his own destruction, and for a moment he could not speak. 3 months, he finally said. She was in my house for 3 months. I told her things. Stop. Emily's voice was firm, not unkind, but firm. You can hate yourself later. We don't have time for it now. Right now, I need you thinking, not drowning. Can you do that? Vincent looked at her, and something in her steadiness, the same steadiness that had walked them both out of a death trap the night before, pulled him back from the edge. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I can do that. Good. Then here's where we are. Emily stood and began to pace the small room, and as she paced, she talked, and it was like watching a machine that had been idling for 3 weeks finally come back to full power. Russo thinks he's already won. That's our advantage. He thinks I'm running scared and you're blind. He doesn't know you found my notebooks. He doesn't know you climbed that fire escape. He definitely doesn't know we're sitting here together right now taking his plan apart. As far as Alexander Russo knows, everything is going exactly the way he designed it, and Thursday night his trap closes and it's over. And you're going to change that how? Emily stopped pacing. By letting the trap spring, she said. On him. Vincent frowned. You want to go through with the shipment, even knowing it's a setup. I want Russo to think we're going through with the shipment. Emily's eyes were bright now, sharp alive in a way Vincent had never seen in the office, because in the office she had always been careful to hide it. Here's the thing about a trap, Mr. Morelli. A trap only works if the person walking into it doesn't know it's there. The second you know where the jaws are, the trap stops being a weapon against you and starts being a weapon you control. Russo built a beautiful machine to destroy you, but he built it based on information Isabella stole from my files, which means every single piece of that machine is built around what I set up, which means I know exactly how it works, which means I can reach inside it and turn it around, and Russo will never see it coming because it will never occur to him that the woman he's hunting is the one holding the blueprints. 7:15, and a plan began to take shape in that motel room line by line, and it was a thing of terrible precision. But first they had a problem, and Emily named it before Vincent could. We can't do this from here, she said. I need to know things I can only learn from inside. I need to know if Sal Bruno's made contact with Russo yet. I need to know if the shipment details have changed since Isabella last photographed them. I need to know which of the other crew members are clean. She looked at him. And that means one of us has to go back to your world. And it can't be me because Russo's people are hunting my face all over the city. So it has to be you. You have to walk back into that office like nothing happened, and like you never climbed a fire escape, like you don't know a single thing, and you have to look Isabella Romano in the eye and smile at her. Vincent's jaw tightened. You want me to go home to the woman who's trying to destroy me and pretend I don't know. I want you to go home to her and be more convincing than you have ever been in your life. Emily's voice was flat. Because the moment Isabella suspects, you know she'll tell Russo, and Russo will move the shipment up and we'll lose our one window. So yes, Mr. Morelli, you're going to go home and you're going to kiss that woman good morning and you're going to complain about your headache and you're going to be so ordinary and so oblivious that she reports to Alexander Russo that everything is perfectly on track. She paused. Can you do that? Because if you can't, we're both dead by Friday. For a long moment, Vincent Morelli was silent. Then he said, you know what the worst part is? I actually cared about her. God help me. Some part of me actually, he shook his head. And the whole time she was laughing at me. She and Russo laughing at how easy I was. Then use it. Emily stepped closer. Every man Russo's ever beaten, he beat because they let their feelings run the play. Don't be one of them. Take everything you feel about Isabella, all that hurt, all that anger, and lock it in a box and don't open it until Thursday night. And when Thursday night comes, her voice dropped, you can open the box in front of her and let her watch her whole plan die and let her understand that the oblivious fool she married herself to was 3 steps ahead of her the entire time, but not 1 second before. Do you understand me? Vincent looked at her and something hardened in his face, something that had been soft and wounded all night, finally setting into stone. I understand, he said. 8 o'clock and Vincent Morelli walked out of that motel and drove back into his old life, and Emily Parker was left alone with a table full of plans and a single burner phone and the enormous, impossible task of dismantling Alexander Russo's operation from a motel room without ever showing her face. She got to work. The first thing she did was call Teresa. Teresa, it's Emily. Don't say my name out loud. Just listen. I need you to do 3 things, and I need you to do them without anyone knowing, especially Isabella, and especially Sal Bruno. Emily's voice was crisp. First, I need eyes on Sal Bruno. I need to know every phone call he makes and every person he meets between now and Thursday. Second, I need you to find out very quietly whether the police have been asking questions about the docks. Not directly. Look at the edges. Has anyone renewed a warrant? Has a patrol pattern changed? Has a certain captain suddenly gotten interested in the harbor? That'll tell us whether Russo's already tipped them off. And third, Emily hesitated. Third, I need you to protect Danny. The reception kid, he's on the Thursday crew, and he has no idea what he's walking into. He's an innocent Teresa. He doesn't belong in this. Whatever happens Thursday, I don't want that boy anywhere near the dock when it goes wrong. Find a reason to pull him off. Send him on an errand. Tell him his mother's sick. I don't care what you tell him. Just keep him out of it. Emily's voice caught just slightly. He used to ask me how my weekend was. He's the only one who ever did. I'm not going to let Russo get him killed. There was a pause on the line. You're a strange woman, Emily Parker, Teresa said quietly. The whole city's hunting you. You're planning a war from a motel room, and you're worried about the reception kid. That's not strange, Teresa. That's the whole point. That's the only point there's ever been. Emily closed her eyes. Now go, and be careful. If Sal Bruno realizes you're watching him, they'll kill you before lunch. 9:30 and back at the office, Vincent Morelli walked in and found Isabella Romano waiting for him with a cup of coffee and a smile, and it took everything he had, every ounce of control he possessed, not to look at her hands and think about them, photographing Emily's files in the dark. There you are, Isabella purred, handing him the coffee. You disappeared last night. I was worried. Headache. Vincent took the coffee and made himself smile. The worst one I've had in years. I drove around for a while and then crashed at the club. I'm sorry I should have called. You should have, Isabella pouted prettily. But I forgive you. She slid her arms around his neck the way she always did, and Vincent held himself still and let her. And he thought about a woman in a motel room saying lock it in a box, and he locked it, and he smiled, and he kissed Isabella Romano on the cheek and said, what would I do without you? And Isabella, satisfied, believing every word, said, you'd fall apart, baby. You know that. I do, Vincent said. I really do. And over her shoulder, unseen, his eyes were as cold and flat as a frozen lake. 10:15 and Emily's burner phone buzzed. Teresa. I have something. Sal Bruno made a call 20 minutes ago from the parking garage. My man couldn't hear it, but he got a photo of the number on the screen. Teresa read it out. Mean anything to you? Emily wrote it down, and then she went very still, because it did mean something to her. She had spent 5 years memorizing numbers, and this one lived in a corner of her memory she had hoped never to visit again. It was a number that belonged to a man named Frank Cazale, and Frank Cazale was not one of Russo's men. Frank Cazale was a police lieutenant. Teresa, Emily said slowly, Sal Bruno just called a cop. A dirty one. Frank Cazale Harbor District, which confirms everything. The police involvement in it isn't a maybe anymore. It's locked in. Russo's man on the inside is coordinating directly with a dirty cop who's going to make sure the raid happens Thursday night at the exact moment the product hits the dock. She was already thinking 3 moves ahead, which is actually good news. How in God's name is that good news? Because now I know exactly who the players are. Emily's pen moved fast across the page. I know Russo's on top. I know Isabella's the plant who set it up. I know Sal Bruno's the inside man on the crew. And I know Frank Cazale's the dirty cop who brings the raid. 4 points, 4 pressure points. And Teresa, plan with 4 known pressure points, isn't a trap anymore. She almost smiled. It's a demolition sequence. You just have to pull them in the right order. 11 o'clock and Emily made a decision that would have terrified anyone else, and that she made with the calm of a woman reading a bus schedule. She was going to turn Russo's own inside man against him. It's the only way, she explained to Vincent that afternoon when he'd slipped away from the office to a diner on the south side where they'd agreed to meet, sitting in a back booth with their coffees going cold. Sal Bruno is the linchpin. He's the one who signals Russo. He's the one coordinating with the cop. He's the one who makes the trap close at the right moment. If we take him out of the equation, the whole thing falls apart. But we can't just kill him, because if Sal Bruno goes missing, Russo knows we're on to him, and he changes everything. So what do? We don't take him out of the equation. Emily's eyes glinted. We keep him in it, but we make him work for us instead of Russo, and he won't even know he's doing it. Vincent stared at her. How do you turn a man who doesn't know he's been turned? You give him information he thinks he stole. Emily leaned forward. Sal Bruno's job is to report the shipment details to Russo. Fine, let him report. But we're going to make sure the details he reports are the details we want Russo to have. We feed Sal Bruno a version of Thursday night that's slightly wrong. Wrong enough that when Russo and his men and that dirty cop all show up to spring their trap, they're springing it on an empty dock at the wrong time in the wrong place, while the real product and the real evidence is somewhere else entirely. She sat back. Russo built his whole plan on stolen information. So we poison the well. We let him keep stealing, and we make sure everything he steals is a lie. 12:40, and the diner was nearly empty, and Vincent Morelli looked at the woman across from him with something close to awe. You've been thinking about this your whole life, he said. Haven't you? Not this exactly, but this. How to beat men like Russo, men like me. Emily was quiet for a moment. When I was 19, she said, I worked for a man before you, a different kind of operation, smaller, uglier. And I watched him get destroyed, Mr. Morelli, because he trusted the wrong people, and he couldn't see 3 feet in front of his own face. And when it all came down, it came down on everyone. The secretaries, the drivers, the bookkeeper who had 2 kids. All of them. Because one arrogant man couldn't see what was coming. Her jaw tightened. I promised myself I would never be near something like that again, without being the one who saw it coming. So yes, I've been thinking about this my whole life, not because I wanted power, because I never wanted to watch innocent people go down for a stupid man's pride ever again. She looked at him. And now here we are. Vincent said nothing for a long moment. The bookkeeper with 2 kids, he said finally. That's Danny, isn't it? That's why you're so set on getting him out. Emily didn't answer, but she didn't have to. 1:15 and they set the plan in motion. It was a delicate thing, feeding false information to an inside man without letting him realize he was being fed. Emily orchestrated it like a symphony. She had Teresa arrange for Sal Bruno to overhear a conversation, a fake one, carefully staged 2 crew members discussing the Thursday shipment, and mentioning a location and a time. Berth 22:11 p.m. Except the real shipment was coming into berth 6 at 9. Sal Bruno, believing he'd stumbled onto real intelligence, would report berth 22 at 11 to Russo, and Russo would build his entire raid around it. But it has to be believable, Emily warned Teresa over the phone. Sal Bruno's not stupid. If it's too easy, he'll smell it. He has to think he worked for it. He has to think he outsmarted us to get it. So make him sweat for it. Make him nearly get caught listening. Make it feel real. And Teresa, 30 years in the life, made it feel real. 2:30 and Sal Bruno made a phone call from the parking garage. Teresa's man got close enough this time to hear 3 words before Bruno noticed him and hung up. 3 word. Berth 22:11. Emily closed her eyes when Teresa relayed it and let out a slow, shaking breath because the first piece had landed exactly where she'd aimed it. He took the bait, she said. Russo's building his raid around a lie right now. Berth 22 at 11. And Thursday night, that's exactly where Alexander Russo and his men and Frank Caselli's raid will all show up. To an empty dock. She opened her eyes. And the real product will already be gone. But even as she said it, a cold thread of doubt moved through her, the same instinct that had woken her in the dark the night before. And Emily Parker had learned a long time ago never to ignore that instinct, because it was going too smoothly. 3 o'clock and the doubt sharpened into something specific, and Emily called Vincent. Something's wrong, she said without preamble. What the plan's working? Bruno took the bait. That's what's wrong. It's working too well. Emily paced the motel room, the phone pressed hard against her ear. Think about it, Mr. Morelli. Alexander Russo is not a stupid man. He's beaten everyone in this city except you, and the only reason he never beat you is because of me. He is careful. He is patient. He plans for contingencies. So why is he building his entire raid around a single piece of information his inside man happened to overhear? Her voice tightened. He wouldn't. A man that careful would verify. He'd have a second source. She stopped dead. Oh no, she whispered. What? Emily, what? He has a second source. Emily's whole body had gone cold. Of course he does. He always has a second source. Isabella gave him my files, but Isabella's not on the crew. She can't confirm night of details. Sal Bruno's on the crew, but Russo's too careful to trust one man. So he'd want someone else. Someone with access. Someone close to the operation that nobody would ever suspect. Her mind raced through the names, the faces, everyone with knowledge of Thursday, and then it landed, and when it landed, she felt sick. Mr. Morelli, who else knew about the shipment? Who else besides the crew had the details? Think. Who did you tell? Silence on the line. Then slowly, in a voice of dawning horror, Vincent said, Teresa. The word hung in the air like a blade. No, Emily said. No, not Teresa. Teresa's the one who caught Isabella. Teresa's the one who's been helping us. Teresa's the only other person who had every detail of Thursday from the beginning, Vincent said quietly. Teresa reviewed your whole file. Teresa knows the real birth in the real time. And Emily, think about it. Who told us Isabella was the plant, Teresa? Who's been feeding us information this whole time, Teresa? What if she's not exposing Russo's people? What if she's controlling what we know? What if the reason everything's gone so smoothly is that we've been playing a game Teresa's been refereeing the whole time? 3:15 and Emily Parker sank down onto the edge of the motel bed, and for the first time since this began, she felt the ground genuinely shift beneath her. I trusted her, Emily said. Vincent, I gave her Danny. I told her to protect Danny. If she's Russo's, then I just handed her the one person I was trying to save. We don't know that she's Russo's, Vincent said. We don't know anything yet. It could be Teresa. It could be someone else. It could be that there's no second source, and I'm just paranoid because my girlfriend turned out to be a spy. He took a breath. But we have to find out before Thursday, because if we're wrong about who's who, then every move we've made is a move Russo already anticipated, and we're not turning his trap around. We're walking deeper into it. Emily sat in silence, her mind spinning through every conversation with Teresa, every piece of information trying to find the thread that would tell her the truth. And she couldn't. That was the terrifying part. Teresa had been careful. Teresa had given her nothing she could check. Everything Teresa had told them they'd taken on faith. There's only one way to know, Emily said finally. How? We test her. Emily stood and her voice steadied because even now, even shaken, the machine kept running. We give Teresa a piece of information that's different from what we gave Sal Bruno. Something only she would have. A third version of Thursday night, and then we watch what happens. If Russo's men show up at Bruno's location berth 22, then Bruno's the source and Teresa's clean. If they show up at Teresa's location, then Teresa's the traitor, and Bruno was a decoy Russo fed us to keep us comfortable. She was pacing again. It's the only way to be sure. We plant two different lies and we see which one Russo believes. 4 o'clock and it was done. Emily fed Teresa a new detail casually in the middle of another conversation, mentioning that the real handoff had been moved to berth 9 at 10 and asking Teresa to keep it absolutely quiet, to tell no one that this was the one piece that mattered most. And Teresa said of course she understood she'd guard it with her life. And then all they could do was wait. 5:30 and Emily's phone rang. Not Teresa. Vincent. "You need to hear this," he said, and his voice was strange. "I did some digging of my own this afternoon. On Teresa, on her background, the families she worked for before me, the Barone family, the Colombo interests." He paused. "Emily, the Barone family was destroyed 6 years ago, wiped out. And do you know who wiped them out?" Emily's stomach dropped. "Russo. Russo. Teresa worked for a family that Alexander Russo destroyed, and then she came to work for me, and I never once asked how she survived it when everyone else went down." Vincent's voice was grim. "People don't survive Russo wiping out their family. Unless they made a deal," Emily whispered. "Unless they made a deal." 6 o'clock, and the two lies sat out in the world like traps of their own, and Emily Parker waited to see which one Alexander Russo would spring, and the waiting was the worst thing she had ever done because she had given Teresa the one thing she cared about protecting. She had given Teresa Danny. And then at 6:40 in the evening, exactly one full day after her, Vincent Morelli had climbed a fire escape in the dark to save the woman he'd thrown away, Emily's burner phone buzzed with a message from Teresa's man, the one who was supposedly watching Sal Bruno. The message was short. It said, "Bruno just met with Russo's people. They're not going to berth 22. Plans changed. They're going to berth 9. 10 o'clock. Thought you'd want to know." Emily read it 3 times. Berth 9, 10 o'clock. The lie she had told Teresa, the lie she had told no one else. Emily set the phone down very slowly, and she felt something cold and final settle over her because now she knew. Now she knew for certain. Teresa was Russo's. Teresa had been Russo's from the beginning. Every piece of information, every warning, every helpful word, all of it had been a leash, and Emily had been walking on it like a fool, and she had handed the traitor the one innocent life she'd been trying to save. She called Vincent. He picked up on the first ring. "It's Teresa," Emily said. Her voice did not shake, but only because she was holding it still by force. "It's confirmed. I fed her berth 9 at 10. I told no one else, and Russo's men just changed their plans to berth 9 at 10. She's his. She's been his the whole time, which means Russo knows everything we've done. He knows we're working together. He knows you found the notebooks. He knows I'm alive and planning against him." Emily closed her eyes. "He's known all of it this entire time because we've been telling Teresa and Teresa's been telling him. We were never turning his trap around, Mr. Morelli. We were building it for him." Silence on the line, a long, terrible silence. "Then we've lost," Vincent said quietly. "No," Emily's eyes snapped open. "No, we haven't lost because Teresa doesn't know that we know." "What? Think, Mr. Morelli." Emily was on her feet now, and the machine was running again faster than ever, because this was the moment everything turned. "We just found out Teresa's the traitor, but Teresa has no idea that we found out. As far as Teresa knows, we still trust her completely. As far as Russo knows, everything's going perfectly. His double agent is inside feeding him everything, and the stupid ex-assistant and the arrogant boss are dancing right where he wants them." Her voice sharpened to a point. "Which means for exactly as long as we can keep pretending we trust Teresa, we control the one thing Russo thinks he controls. We control the information going to him. We've been handed the most dangerous position in this entire game, and we didn't even know it. Teresa isn't our disaster, Mr. Morelli." Emily Parker's eyes were burning now, cold and bright and absolutely certain. Teresa is our way in. She's the pipe that runs straight into Alexander Russo's ear. And now that we know it's poisoned, we get to choose exactly what goes through it. She grabbed a fresh sheet of stationery. Russo thinks he's playing us through Teresa. But starting right now, we're going to play Russo through Teresa, and he is never, ever going to see it coming, because the one thing a man like Alexander Russo can never imagine is that his own perfect spy has just become his executioner. She uncapped the pen. Get back here, tonight, because Thursday just stopped being Russo's trap. She started to write. It just became ours. Vincent came back to the motel that night, and this time when he walked in, he looked at Emily differently. He had spent the drive over thinking about all of it. Teresa, Isabella, Sal Bruno, the dirty cop. 6 years of a woman who'd survived the impossible because she'd sold her soul to the man who murdered her family. And through all of it, the one constant, the one fixed point, was the heavy-set woman sitting at the little motel table with a pen in her hand, who had seen every trap coming, who had turned every disaster into an opening, who, as he now understood, without any doubt at all, the single most formidable person he had ever met in his life. Okay, he said, closing the door. I'm here. Talk to me. How do we play Teresa without her realizing she's being played when she spent 30 years learning to spot exactly that? 8:15 at night, and Emily didn't look up from the paper. We don't try to fool her about small things, she said. That's how you get caught. Teresa's too good to fool on the details. So we don't fool her on the details. We fool her on the one thing she'll never think to question. Emily set down the pen and looked at him. We fool her about which side is winning. Vincent sat down across from her. Explain. Right now, Teresa thinks the plan is going perfectly for Russo. She thinks we trust her. She thinks she's controlling everything we know. She feels safe, Mr. Morelli, and a person who feels safe stops looking over their shoulder. Emily's eyes were steady. So we keep her feeling safe. We keep feeding her exactly what a desperate, cornered Vincent Morelli and a scared ex-assistant would be doing. We let her watch us lose. We let her report to Russo that we're falling apart, that we're panicking, that we're making mistakes. And every mistake she reports will be a mistake we chose to make, aimed exactly where we want Russo to look. She leaned forward. The trick isn't to lie to Teresa. The trick is to hand her a defeat so convincing that she can't wait to bring it to Russo. Because the more certain Russo becomes that he's already won, the less carefully he'll watch the one place we're actually going to hit him. And where's that? Emily was quiet for a moment. His money, she said. Not his men, not the shipment, not even his life, his money. She tapped the table. Everything Russo is everything he's built sits on top of a financial structure. Accounts launderers, a web of clean businesses that washes dirty cash. Isabella's family, the political family, that's part of it. That's why Russo put her close to you in the first place, not just to spy, but because her family's connections are woven into how he moves money through the city. And here's what Russo doesn't know. Her voice dropped. In 5 years of protecting you, I didn't just learn your operation, Mr. Morelli. I learned his. Every time Russo tried to hit us and failed, I studied how the attack was funded, where the money came from, who touched it. I built a map, a complete map of Alexander Russo's financial nervous system. It's in my head, and it's in one of those binders in your office, and it is the single most dangerous document in this city. Vincent stared at her. You've had the blueprint to destroy Russo this whole time. I've had it for 2 years. Emily met his eyes. And I never used it because I didn't want to destroy anyone. I just wanted to keep you safe. But Russo took that choice away from me when he sent 3 men to my door. Something cold moved across her face. So now we're going to use it. Thursday night, while Russo and his men and that dirty cop are all standing on an empty dock, waiting for a shipment that isn't coming, we're going to reach into the heart of his financial structure and pull it out by the roots. And by the time he realizes the dock is empty, it'll already be gone. All of it, every dollar, every account, every clean business. Alexander Russo will walk onto that dock, the richest, most powerful man in Chicago, and he'll walk off it with nothing. 9 o'clock, and the true shape of the plan finally came clear, and it was not what Vincent had imagined. So the shipment was never the real play, he said slowly. The shipment was always the distraction. Russo thinks it's his trap. We're letting him keep thinking that. We're going to put on a show at that dock so convincing that every eye Russo has every man, every resource, every ounce of his attention is pointed at berth 9 at 10 o'clock Thursday night. Emily's pen moved as she spoke, sketching it out. And while all of Alexander Russo is looking at that dock, the real operation happens somewhere else entirely. Quiet, clean, no guns, just paper and access and the map in my head. We don't beat Russo in a gunfight, Mr. Morelli. We were never going to win a gunfight. He has too many men. We beat him the only way a man like him can actually be beaten. We make him poor. And a mafia boss with no money is just a scared man with a lot of enemies. Vincent Morelli sat back and looked at her, and he shook his head slowly, and there was something like reverence in it. 5 years, he said. 5 years you sat outside my door, and I thought you were keeping my calendar. I was keeping your calendar, Emily said, almost smiling. I was just also doing about 40 other things at the same time. 940, and the plan needed players, and here was the hardest part because the two of them could not do it alone. They needed people they could trust, and in a world where Teresa had turned out to be Russo's, and Isabella had been a plant, and Sal Bruno was an inside man, trust was in very short supply. We need someone who can move money, Emily said. A financial person, someone who understands accounts and transfers and how to unwind a laundering structure without tripping every alarm. And it has to be someone Russo doesn't know about, someone who was never in your files because anyone in your files Isabella photographed. Vincent thought for a long moment. There's one person, he said, but you're not going to like it. Who? My brother. Emily went still. You have a brother. Marco. Vincent's face was complicated. Older, he got out years ago before I ever got in. He's clean now, completely legitimate. Runs an accounting firm downtown, does taxes for dentists and restaurant owners, has a wife and 2 kids, and a dog and a house in the suburbs. He hasn't spoken to me in 11 years. Vincent's voice was quiet. He told me the last time we talked that if I ever came to him for help with anything in this life, he'd close the door in my face. And he meant it. Then he's exactly who we need, Emily said softly, because he's the one person connected to you that Russo could never have anticipated. A brother who hates you, who wants nothing to do with any of this, who isn't in a single file anywhere. She looked at Vincent. But you have to go to him. And you have to convince a man who swore he'd never help you to help you save the life of a woman he's never met. Can you do that? Vincent was silent. I don't know, he admitted. 11 years, Emily. He looked at me like I was already dead. Then don't ask him to help you. Emily's voice was gentle now. Ask him to help me. Ask him to help Danny. Ask him to help Mrs. Delgado and Walter and every innocent person who's going to get crushed if Alexander Russo wins. Don't make it about the brother who broke his heart. Make it about the people who never chose any of this. She paused. That's how you reach a good man, Mr. Morelli. You don't appeal to what he owes you. You appeal to what he can't stand to see happen. 10:15 the next morning, and Vincent Morelli stood on the porch of a nice house in a quiet suburb, and he rang the doorbell, and when the door opened, a man who looked like an older, softer version of himself stared at him with an expression that went from shock to anger to something cold and closed in the space of 2 seconds. No, Marco said and started to shut the door. There's a woman, Vincent said fast, jamming his foot in the gap. There's a woman, Marco, and she's going to die because of me, because of something I did, and I can't save her without you. She's not part of this life. She never wanted any of it. She spent 5 years quietly keeping people alive and got nothing for it. And now a man named Russo is going to kill her because she knows too much, and I am begging you. I have never begged you for anything in 11 years. I'm begging you now. Not for me, for her. Marco stood in the doorway, his hand on the door, his jaw tight. You always did this, he said. Even when we were kids, you'd make a mess and then find a way to make it about somebody else. So I couldn't say no. His eyes were hard. Why should I believe there's really a woman? Why should I believe this isn't just you needing your accountant brother to launder something? And that was when a voice behind Vincent said quietly, because I'm the woman and I'm the one who's going to die, and I would never have let him come here if there were any other way. 10:20 and Marco Morelli looked past his brother and saw a heavy-set woman standing on his front walk, 30-something, plainly dressed with the tiredest, steadiest eyes he had ever seen, and something in her face stopped him. Who are you? He said. My name is Emily Parker, she said. I was your brother's assistant 4 or 5 years. He fired me over a cup of coffee 3 weeks ago, and it turned out I was the only thing standing between him and a man who wants to destroy everything he has, including the lives of a lot of people who never did anything wrong. She held his gaze. I don't want your help for Vincent, Mr. Morelli. Honestly, part of me thinks he earned every bit of this. I want your help because there's a 23-year-old boy named Danny who's going to get killed on a dock Thursday night if we can't stop it, and an old woman in my building and an old man named Walter who can't hold a pen steady, and none of them chose this world the way your brother did. The way you chose to leave it. She took a breath. I understand if you close the door. I'd probably close it too, but I had to look you in the eye and ask because that's the kind of person I try to be. So I'm asking. Please. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Marco Morelli looked at his brother and then back at Emily, and he stepped aside from the door. Come in, he said quietly. Both of you and Vincent. His voice hardened. I'm doing this for her, not for you. Don't you dare mistake this for forgiveness. I won't, Vincent said, and his voice was thick. Thank you, Marco. Thank you. 11 o'clock, and around Marco's kitchen table with the blinds drawn and coffee going cold, the real plan came together, and Marco Morelli, who had spent 11 years running clean books for dentists, turned out to be exactly the weapon Emily had known he'd be. Because Marco understood money. He understood how it hid and how it moved and how a structure like Russo's held together. And when Emily laid out the map in her head, the full picture of Alexander Russo's financial nervous system, Marco went pale and then very, very focused. This is, he breathed, tracing the connection she described. Emily, this is a masterpiece. Whoever built Russo's laundering structure was brilliant. But you're right, there's a weakness. There's always a weakness in these things, a central node, a single point where all the clean money and all the dirty money have to touch to get reconciled. He looked up. If we hit that node at exactly the right moment when the money's in motion mid-transfer, we don't just freeze his accounts. We collapse the whole thing. Every dollar in the structure gets caught in a legal quicksand it can't get out of. It'd take him years to untangle it if he ever could. He sat back. But the timing has to be perfect. It has to happen while the money's moving. And money like that only moves on specific days at specific times when there's a big transaction to cover, Emily finished, like a $40 million shipment. The room went silent. Thursday night, Vincent said slowly, the shipment isn't just Russo's trap for us. It's the reason his money's going to be in motion. He has to move funds to cover the deal, to pay for the product to wash the profit. Thursday night, while everyone's looking at the dock, Russo's whole financial structure is going to be wide open. Which is why Thursday was always the day, Emily said quietly. Not because of the shipment, because of the money. The shipment was just the thing that forced the money to move. Russo built his trap around Thursday, and in doing so, he built his own trap around Thursday too, and he never even saw it because he was so busy setting a snare for you that he forgot he was standing in one himself. Noon, and there was one more piece, and it was the piece Emily had been circling all along the piece that made her stomach tighten every time she thought about it. Danny. He can't be on that dock Thursday night, Emily said. I don't care what else happens. That boy comes off the crew. Teresa's supposed to be handling that, Vincent said, and then caught himself. Except Teresa's Russo's, which means Teresa never pulled Danny off, which means Danny's still on the crew and Teresa lied to me about protecting him and Russo wants him there. Emily's voice was cold with dread. Of course he does. Russo wants bodies on that dock when the raid comes. He wants your people caught or killed. Danny's exactly the kind of expendable piece Russo would make sure stays right in the kill zone. She stood up. I have to get him out myself. I can't trust Teresa to do it, and I can't tell Teresa I want him out because that tips hers off that I know something. So I have to reach Danny directly without Teresa knowing and get that boy as far from Berth 9 as I can before Thursday night. That's a risk, Vincent said. If Russo's watching Danny and you contact him, then Russo finds out I'm alive and close, which he already knows because Teresa told him. Emily was already moving. The risk isn't me getting exposed. The risk is Danny. And I'm not going to let a boy who used to ask me how my weekend was die on a dock because I was too careful to reach out my hand. She grabbed her coat. I'm going to find Danny today, and I'm going to get him out. 1:30, and Emily Parker did something that terrified her more than anything else in the entire plan. She showed her face. She waited outside the coffee shop where Danny went every day on his lunch break, a habit she knew, because she knew everything about the people she cared about. And when he came out with his sandwich and his soda, she stepped up beside him quietly and said, "Danny, don't react. Keep walking. Walk with me." Danny nearly dropped his sandwich. "Miss Parker. Oh my God, Miss Parker. Where have you been? Everyone's saying." "Danny, listen to me." Emily kept her voice low and steady, steering him around a corner away from the street. "I need you to do exactly what I say, and I need you to not ask why, and I need you to trust me the way I've always been honest with you. Can you do that?" The boy looked at her, this woman who had always been kind to him, the only person in that whole cold building who'd ever treated him like a human being, and he nodded. "Thursday night," Emily said, "the job at the docks. You are not going to be there." "But Mr. Morelli put me on the crew. I can't just—" "Danny." Emily gripped his arm. "That job is going to go wrong, very wrong. People are going to get hurt or arrested or worse, and you are not going to be one of them because you are the only person in that entire building who ever asked me how my weekend was, and I will not let this world take you the way it takes everyone else." Her voice cracked just slightly. "You're going to get sick Thursday. Genuinely sick. Food poisoning, the flu, I don't care. You're going to call in, and you're going to stay home, and you're going to lock your door, and you're not going to answer the phone for anyone, not even Teresa, especially not Teresa, until you hear from me directly. Do you understand?" Danny's eyes were wide. "Miss Parker, you're scaring me." "Good," Emily said softly. "Be scared. Scared keeps you alive. I learned that a long time ago." She let go of his arm. "Thursday, you stay home. Promise me." And Danny, 23 years old and in far over his head, looked at the woman who had always looked out for him, and he promised. 2:15, and as Emily walked away from that coffee shop, she felt for the first time in days a small, warm flicker of something like peace, because whatever else happened Thursday night, she'd gotten Danny out. She'd pulled one innocent soul out of the fire before it started. And that was exactly when her burner phone rang. And it was Teresa, and Teresa's voice was warm and helpful and full of concern, and every word of it was poison. "Emily, honey, I've been trying to reach you. Listen, I got Danny handled just like you asked. Pulled him off the Thursday crew this morning, sent him out of town on an errand. That boy's safe and sound nowhere near the docks. I know how much you worried about him, so I wanted you to hear it from me. He's taken care of." Emily stopped walking, because she had just come from Danny. Danny was still on the crew. Teresa had not pulled him off, had not sent him anywhere, had done nothing but lie smoothly and warmly about a boy's safety. And in that moment, standing on a cold Chicago sidewalk with the phone against her ear, Emily Parker understood something that turned her blood to ice. Teresa wasn't just lying to keep Danny in the kill zone. Teresa was lying to make Emily think Danny was safe so that Emily wouldn't go looking for him, so that Emily wouldn't do exactly what she'd just done, which was show her face in public to reach him. Which meant Teresa had wanted Emily to feel safe about Danny. Which meant Teresa had been counting on Emily to stay hidden, to stay put, to stay exactly where she was. Which meant Teresa had wanted to know where Emily was. "Teresa," Emily said slowly, keeping her voice light, keeping the terror out of it. "Thank you. That's such a relief. I've been so worried about him." "Of course, honey. You just sit tight wherever you are. Let Vincent and me handle Thursday. You've done enough. You just sit tight wherever you are." She was fishing. She was fishing for a location, and she'd almost gotten it because Emily had almost said something about where she was, and Teresa had spent 30 years learning to pull exactly that kind of thing out of exactly this kind of conversation. "I will," Emily said. "I'm safe. Vincent set me up somewhere out of the city way out past the county line. I don't even know the name of the town, honestly. I'm just glad it's far from all this." The lie came smooth and easy. "I'll talk to you soon, Teresa. And thank you. For Danny, it means everything." She hung up. And then she stood on that sidewalk shaking, because she had just realized how close she'd come. Teresa hadn't slipped. Teresa didn't slip. Teresa had called with a lie designed to make Emily comfortable and careless, and it had almost worked. And if Emily hadn't just come from Danny, if she hadn't known for a fact that Teresa's warm, helpful words were false, she would have believed every one of them. 2:40, and Emily called Vincent, and her voice was tight. Teresa just called me. She told me she pulled Danny off the crew and sent him out of town. It's a lie. Danny's still on the crew. I just saw him. Emily took a breath. But that's not the important part. The important part is why she lied. She lied to make me feel safe, Mr. Morelli. She wanted me comfortable. She wanted me to stop moving. And she tried to get my location out of me casually in the middle of it. Emily closed her eyes. Which means Russo's not content to wait until Thursday. He's hunting for me right now actively, and Teresa's his hound. He doesn't just want to beat you Thursday night. He wants me in a room first. Before the doc, before the money. He wants to make sure the one person who could turn his plan around is neutralized before the plan even runs. Then you have to move, Vincent said sharply. Right now. Get out of that motel. They might already. I already left the motel this morning. I'm not going back. Emily was already walking fast, blending into the afternoon crowd, becoming invisible, the way she'd always been good at being invisible. But it changes the timeline, Mr. Morelli. Russo's getting aggressive, which means we can't wait passively for Thursday and hope everything holds. We have to accelerate. We have to make our move before Russo makes his, before he finds me, before Teresa gets close enough to matter. She turned a corner, disappearing into a subway entrance. Get Marco ready. Get everything in position, because we're not going to give Russo until Thursday night to spring his trap. 3 o'clock and deep underground on a subway platform with a train roaring in, Emily Parker made the decision that would end everything one way or the other. We're going to spring ours first, she said. Wednesday, tomorrow night. We hit Russo's money 24 hours early while he's still setting up for a Thursday. He thinks he controls while Teresa's still reporting a version of events that's already obsolete, while every piece Russo has is aimed at a day that's no longer the day. Her voice was iron. He built his whole plan around Thursday, so we're going to take Thursday away from him. And by the time Alexander Russo realizes the day changed, he'll already be poor, and his spy will already be useless, and the trap he spent 3 months building will close on nothing but empty air. The train roared into the station. One problem, Vincent said. If we move Wednesday and Danny's still on the Thursday crew, and Teresa lied about pulling him, then when Thursday comes and the raid hits an empty dock, Russo's going to be humiliated and furious and looking for someone to make pay. And the crew that shows up Thursday night not knowing anything changed won't be a crew anymore by then, Emily said. Because before we move Wednesday, I'm going to make sure every innocent person is clear. Danny first, then anyone else on that crew who doesn't deserve what's coming. I'll warn them myself if I have to. The doors open. I'm not going to win this by letting people burn Mr. Morelli. That's Russo's way. It was almost your way. It's not going to be mine. She stepped toward the train. 24 hours. Get Marco. Get ready. Wednesday night, we take everything from Alexander Russo and we do it clean, and we get every innocent soul out first, or we don't do it at all. And as the subway doors slid shut between them, the last thing Vincent heard before the train pulled her away into the dark was Emily Parker's voice, steady and certain and utterly without fear, saying the words that would decide the fate of 2 empires and every life caught between them. Wednesday night, tell no one, especially not Teresa. The train roared into the tunnel, and Emily Parker vanished into the city alone, hunted 24 hours from the most dangerous thing she had ever done, carrying in her head the one weapon that could bring down the most powerful man in Chicago if it didn't get her killed first. Wednesday came, and with it, the longest day of Emily Parker's life. She spent the morning making the innocent disappear. She reached the crew members one by one quietly through channels Teresa didn't know existed, giving each of them a reason to be somewhere else Thursday night. A cousin's emergency, a car that suddenly wouldn't start, a tip that the job had been postponed. She did it so carefully, so gradually, that no single warning could be traced back to a pattern. And by noon Wednesday, of the 6 men assigned to that dock, 4 had quietly found reasons to be far away when Thursday night came. That left 2, Sal Bruno, who she wanted on that dock because Sal Bruno was Russo's, and Sal Bruno deserved exactly what was coming. And Danny who Teresa had lied about. Danny who was still officially on the crew. Danny who had promised Emily he'd stay home and lock his door, 10:15. Wednesday morning, and Emily called Danny to confirm, and the phone rang and went to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. A third time. Voicemail. And Emily Parker felt the first cold finger of dread press against her spine because Danny always answered. Danny was a boy who answered his phone on the first ring, who was terrified of missing a call from someone important, and Danny was not answering. In Emily's mind, that relentless machine began running through the possibilities, and every single one of them was bad. She called Vincent. I can't reach Danny. Maybe he's not just anything, Vincent. He always answers. Something's wrong. Emily was already moving. Teresa lied about sending him out of town. What if that wasn't just a lie to make me comfortable? What if Russo took him? What if Danny's not answering because someone made sure he can't? Silence on the line. Emily, Vincent said slowly, if Russo has Danny, then Russo has leverage. Over you. Because he knows he has to know by now that Danny's the one soft spot you'll break your own rules to protect. I know exactly what it means, Emily said, and her voice had gone very quiet and very cold. It means Alexander Russo just found the one card that works on me, and it means everything changes. 11 o'clock Wednesday, and the burner phone rang with a number Emily didn't recognize, and she knew before she even answered that it was him. Miss Parker. The voice was smooth, cultured, almost warm, and infinitely more frightening for it. I've wanted to speak with you for such a long time. You've caused me a great deal of trouble over the years. Do you know that 3 years I couldn't understand why I could never touch Vincent Morelli? And it was you, this whole time, a quiet little assistant. Alexander Russo laughed softly. You are without question the most impressive person I've ever tried to destroy. I mean that as the highest compliment I'm capable of. You have Danny, Emily said flatly. I have Danny. No denial, not even a pause. A sweet boy, frightened. He kept asking me why. He didn't understand any of it, poor thing. He kept saying, you told him to stay home, and I have to tell you, Miss Parker, that was the piece that confirmed everything for me. Because if you warned him to stay home, then you knew about Thursday. And if you knew about Thursday, then you and Vincent have been playing a much longer game than my dear Teresa realized. Russo's voice sharpened just slightly, which means it's time for you and I to have an honest conversation. Emily closed her eyes. Danny. They had Danny. What do you want? I want you, Miss Parker. That's all I've ever wanted since I understood what you were. I want the woman who beat me for 3 years working for me instead of against me. Come to me. Tonight. Come alone, come willingly, and put that extraordinary mind in my service, and I'll let the boy walk away without a scratch. He goes home. He forgets any of this happened. He lives a long, boring, happy life. A pause. Or you don't come and I make you a different kind of offer, one written in a language I suspect you understand very well. Your choice, but choose quickly. 11:15, and Emily Parker stood alone in the cold with the most dangerous man in Chicago on the phone and an innocent boy's life in the balance. And she did the thing she had always done, the thing that made her who she was. She thought 3 steps ahead. Where, she said. Emily, no. Vincent's voice when she called him 30 seconds later was raw with panic. You cannot walk into a room with Alexander Russo. That's not a trade, that's execution with extra steps. He'll take Danny and you both, and then he'll have everything. He'll have you. He'll have the map in your head. Vincent, her voice cut through his. Listen to me. I'm going to go. Emily, I'm going to go, and here's why, so stop panicking and start thinking. She was walking fast now, her mind moving faster. Russo just made a mistake. The first real mistake he's made this whole time. He got emotional. He wants me so badly that he grabbed Danny to force my hand, and in doing so, he told me 2 things he didn't mean to tell me. 1, he doesn't know we're moving tonight. He still thinks Thursday's the day. He wants me tonight to take me off the board before Thursday, which means our timeline still works. And 2, her voice dropped. He wants me alive and willing. He doesn't want to kill me, Vincent. He wants to use me, which means when I walk into that room, I'm not walking into an execution. I'm walking into a negotiation. And negotiation, handling dangerous men in a room, keeping everyone calm, finding the exit nobody else sees. That's the thing I've done every single day for 5 years. She took a breath. He thinks he's luring me into a trap. He's actually inviting the most dangerous person he's ever met into the center of his own operation willingly and handing her a reason to burn it down. He just doesn't know it yet. And the plan Marco's ready to move tonight, the plan runs exactly as designed. That's the beautiful part. Emily almost smiled, and there was something terrible in it. You and Marco move on Russo's money tonight right on schedule, while I keep Russo occupied in a room in person with his full attentions on me. I'm not the sacrifice, Vincent. I'm the distraction. Russo thinks he's pulling me off the board. He's actually pulling himself off the board, sitting in a room gloating over his prize, while 3 miles away his entire financial empire quietly dies. Her voice was iron. He wanted me in a room, fine. I'll be in the room and I'll keep him there talking, feeling powerful right up until the moment his phone starts ringing with the news that everything he owns just turned to ash. 12:30 Wednesday afternoon, and the plan changed shape one final time, and it was audacious enough to be insane. There's still Danny, Vincent said. Assume, even if the money works, even if you keep Russo occupied, when it all comes down, Russo's going to be in that room with you and Danny, and he's going to realize what happened in a cornered Alexander Russo with 2 hostages. Which is why you're not going to be moving the money 3 miles away, Emily said. You're going to be moving it from as close to that room as you can get. And the second it's done, the second Russo's empire is gone, I need you there, Vincent. Not for revenge, for extraction. To get Danny and me out in the 10 seconds of chaos when Russo realizes he's lost everything. She paused. Can you do that? Can you be there at the worst moment in the most dangerous room in the city to pull 2 people out? Vincent Morelli, who 3 weeks ago had fired this woman over a cup of coffee, did not hesitate. I'll be there, he said. Whatever it costs, I'll be there. Then it's set. Emily took a long breath. Tonight, I walk into Russo's room at 9. Marco starts moving the money at 9:15 the moment I've got Russo's attention locked. By 9:45, if Marco's as good as you say, Russo's structure collapses. And somewhere in the 90 seconds after that, when Russo's world is ending, and everyone in that room is looking at their phones instead of at me, that's our window. That's when it all lives or dies. She closed her eyes. Get Marco. Tell him everything depends on his timing, and Vincent. Her voice softened just slightly. If this goes wrong, if I don't walk out of that room, the binder, the one with Russo's financial map, make sure it gets to the right people. Make sure it wasn't for nothing. It's not going to go wrong. Make sure anyway. 9 o'clock Wednesday night, and Emily Parker walked into a warehouse on the edge of the city, alone, unarmed, exactly as she'd promised. And Alexander Russo was waiting for her. He was not what she'd expected. Smaller, older, with kind eyes, which was the most frightening thing about him, because kind eyes on a man like this meant he'd learned long ago how useful they were. And beside him in a chair, pale and shaking, but alive, was Danny. Miss Parker, Danny's voice cracked. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry I didn't answer my phone. I was in the shower and then they were just there. I didn't. It's all right, Danny. Emily's voice was steady, warm, the voice she'd used 1,000 times to calm frightened people. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. She looked at Russo. Let him go. I'm here. That was the deal. It was. Russo smiled. And I'm a man of my word. But surely you'll forgive me if I wait just a little while until I'm certain you're going to be cooperative. Sit, Miss Parker. Please, we have so much to discuss. 9:10 and Emily Parker sat down across from the most powerful man in Chicago, and she began quietly and expertly to do the one thing she had been born to do. She kept him talking. You want to know how I did it? She said. How I beat you for 3 years. That's what's really eating at you, isn't it? Not the losses, the not knowing. Russo's smile flickered just barely, and she knew she'd found it, the thread to pull. Enlighten me, he said, and Emily talked. She talked about the routes, the timing, the 1,000 small observations, and she watched Alexander Russo lean forward, hungry, fascinated, his full attention locked onto her, the way a man locks onto the one puzzle that ever defeated him. She fed that hunger. She stretched it out. She made every answer lead to another question, and every question by another minute. Because somewhere out in the dark, Marco Morelli's fingers were flying across a keyboard, reaching into the heart of Russo's financial nervous system, and every second Emily kept Russo talking was a second Marco needed. 9:25 and Russo's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, frowned, ignored it. 9:30 and it buzzed again, and again. Something wrong? Emily asked innocently. Nothing, but a small crease had appeared between his brows. You were saying about the Petrov container. She kept talking, but now she was watching the phone too, and she was counting and her heart was hammering because this was the moment. This was the 90 seconds where everything lived or died and Danny was still in that chair and Vincent was somewhere close, but not close enough. And if Marco was even a little too slow or if Russo looked at that phone 1 second too early, it all came apart. 9:38 and the phone rang. Not a buzz, a call, and Russo, annoyed, snatched it up. What? I said no interruptions, and then he went silent. Emily watched the color drain out of Alexander Russo's face. She watched 30 years of power and certainty and control crack and crumble in real time as a voice on the other end of the phone told him something that made no sense, could not be true, and yet was happening right now irreversibly. She watched him stand up. She watched his hands start to shake. She watched the most feared man in Chicago realize all at once that everything he was, everything he'd built, everything he'd spent his whole life accumulating had just vanished. That's not possible, Russo whispered into the phone. Move the funds, move them. Now get them out, get them. But the funds could not be moved. The funds were caught in the legal quicksand. Marco had built frozen mid-transfer, every account, every business, every dollar locked in a trap that would take years to escape if it ever could. Alexander Russo was in the space of 90 seconds, no longer a rich man, no longer a powerful man, just a man in a warehouse holding a phone surrounded by an empire that had turned to smoke. 9:40 and he looked up at Emily Parker, and understanding bloomed across his face, terrible and complete. He breathed. It was never Thursday. It was never the doc. You did this right now while you sat here talking to me about containers. His voice rose, shaking with rage and disbelief. You walked into my own house and you burned it down while I watched. Yes, Emily said quietly. I did. And that was the moment it could have ended in blood. That was the moment a lesser man, a purely violent man, would have simply killed her and Danny and salted the earth. Emily saw it in his eyes, the impulse the animal needed to destroy the thing that had destroyed him. But Emily had been reading Dangerous Men for her entire life, and she'd read this one too. You can kill me, she said before he could move, her voice perfectly level. You can kill me and Danny both right now, but thank Alexander. You're a man who's just lost everything. In an hour, every enemy you have is going to know you're weak. The police you paid are going to stop taking your calls. The men who feared you are going to smell blood. In an hour, you're going to need every friend, every option, every mercy you can find. And a man who murders an unarmed woman and an innocent boy in a warehouse the same night his empire collapses. She held his gaze. That man has no future at all. But a man who walks away clean tonight, who hurts no one who lives to rebuild, that man has a chance, small but real. Her voice softened, almost kind. I'm not your enemy anymore, Alexander. I already won. There's nothing left to take. So let the boy go. Walk out that door and live. 9:43 and Alexander Russo stood in the ruins of his life and stared at the woman who'd ended it. In something in him, some cold, calculating survival instinct that had kept him alive for 60 years heard the truth in her words. Because she was right. She had already won. And there was no profit, none at all, in adding 2 murders to a night that had already destroyed him. Slowly his hand fell away from his jacket. Take the boy, he said, his voice hollow. Take him and get out of my sight. And then the warehouse door burst open and Vincent Morelli was there. 9:44. And for one terrible frozen second, everything hung in the balance because Vincent Morelli had come for revenge as much as for rescue, had spent 3 weeks with a rage building in him. And here was Alexander Russo, the man who'd sent a spy into his bed, and 3 men to Emily's door, standing right in front of him, defeated and vulnerable, and asking to be destroyed. Vincent, Emily said sharply. No. He looked at her. He's beaten, Emily said. It's done. Look at him. He's already lost everything. If you kill him now, you're not a man who won. You're just one more killer in a warehouse. And everything you've learned these 3 weeks, everything you've started to become dies right here with him. She stood and she moved to Danny, and she helped the shaking boy to his feet. You came here to save people, Vincent, not to add to the bodies. Prove to me you understand the difference. Prove it to yourself. And Vincent Morelli stood in that doorway, every instinct screaming for blood, and he looked at Emily Parker, holding up a frightened boy, and he made the choice that Emily had spent 3 weeks teaching him he was capable of making. He lowered his hand. "Get out," he told Russo, his voice like gravel. "Before I change my mind, get out and never let me see your face again." 9:46 and Alexander Russo walked out of that warehouse, a ruined man and Emily Parker. And Vincent Morelli and a boy named Danny walked out the other side into the cold night air, alive, all three of them alive. Months later, the Morelli organization was a different thing entirely. Vincent had spent those months doing something no one who knew him would have believed possible. He'd stepped back from the worst of the life, pulled his people out of the most dangerous corners of it, started turning an empire built on fear into something that, while never clean, was at least no longer built on crushing the innocent. It was slow, it was imperfect, but it was real, and it had started the night he chose not to pull a trigger in a warehouse. And Emily Parker did not go back to being an assistant. Vincent had offered her the title she'd always deserved, Chief Operations Director, a seat beside him instead of behind him. And Emily had considered it for a long time. But in the end, she'd said no. "I told you what I wanted," she reminded him the day she made her choice. "I told you in that motel room. I don't want power. I never did. I want peace." She'd smiled. "But I'll help you on my terms, from a distance. When you need someone to see 3 steps ahead, you can call me. But I'm not going back into that world full-time, Vincent. I did my 5 years. I've earned my quiet life." And so Emily Parker got the thing she wanted all along. A small apartment, a real one this time, with no bag packed by the door and no need to check the street. She still helped Mrs. Delgado with the groceries. She still helped Walter with his forms. And Danny, who'd left the life entirely after that night, who Marco Morelli had quietly given a job at his accounting firm, still came by sometimes on weekends. And the first thing he always asked every single time was, "How was your weekend, Miss Parker?" And every time Emily smiled and told him. As for Isabella Romano, she vanished the night Russo's empire collapsed, ran to whatever family connections would still take her, understanding that a plant whose master has been destroyed is worth nothing to anyone. Teresa disappeared too, 30 years of survival instincts, telling her that both the men she'd played had reasons to want her found. Neither of them was ever heard from again in Chicago. They had bet everything on Alexander Russo, and Alexander Russo had lost. And on a quiet evening some months after all of it, Vincent Morelli came to Emily's small apartment, unannounced the way he sometimes did now, and he brought 2 coffees and he set one down beside her at her little kitchen table, where she was helping Walter over the phone understand a letter from the pension office. Emily looked up surprised. "You remembered how I take it?" Vincent smiled. "I'm learning." "After 5 years?" "Yes." He sat down across from her in her small, quiet kitchen, a long way from the oak desk where he'd once pointed a finger and thrown her away. "Because some people are easy to notice, and some people you don't understand until you've lost them and spent every day since learning to see." He looked at her, this woman who had saved his life, his empire, and something in him he hadn't known was worth saving. "I spent 5 years calling myself a genius. I was never the genius, Emily. I was just the face. You were the mind. You were always the mind." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and patted his hand, once the way she'd patted 1,000 frightened people's hands over the years. "You're learning, Mr. Morelli," she said gently. "That's what matters. Most people never do." And she went back to helping Walter with his letter, and Vincent sat with her in the quiet, and outside the window the city went on, unaware that the most powerful person in it was sitting at a small kitchen table drinking a cheap coffee, patiently explaining a pension form to an old man who couldn't hold a pen. Because that was the truth that Vincent Morelli had learned too late to keep it from costing him everything, and just in time to keep it from costing him her. The strongest person in any room is almost never the loudest. It is not the one who points fingers, or the one who inspires fear, or the one whose name makes people tremble. It is the quiet one in the corner, the one everybody overlooks, the one holding the whole world together with nothing but patience and attention and a refusal to let things fall apart. Vincent Morelli had thrown that person away over a cup of coffee. And he had spent everything he had learning that the greatest strength of any empire was never the money, never the fear, never the power. It was the person nobody thought to thank. Emily Parker had known that her whole life, and in the end she was the only one still standing.